for Wednesday, August 5th, calling the meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. Thanks for your patience as we got some technological details worked out. Tonight, we will be taking public comment through the Airtable submission form that we used last time. If you haven't seen it previously, it will be posted in the chat. If you click on that link, it will pop up a form. It will give the ability to make a comment or ask a question. And then it also gives the ability to tag a particular topic area that your question might be related to. That helps us sort the questions. I was saying just as we signed on that tonight you are, of course, welcome to make public comment, but we spent a substantial portion of our last meeting trying to get in as many comments as questions, trying to field, trying to merge questions, people who all had similar questions, and trying to ask those questions of administration. This evening, when we get to the reopening portion of the discussion, I will forewarn you in advance. We may not be able to take substantial public questions because we do have to give the decision makers on this board the opportunity to speak with one another and to try and determine where we are and if we are ready to take a vote this evening, or if we are not ready to take a vote this evening, how that is going to be handled and whether there will be another meeting before there is a reopening vote. I'm saying if, because I'm only one of 7 and I cannot make that decision alone, but I know there is a lot of anxiety about tonight's meeting, and I felt like it was only fair to forewarn the public at the beginning. While our agenda does say WPS reopening plan vote required, and while a vote will be required before plans are ultimately submitted to the state, it is not guaranteed that that vote will take place tonight. Whether a vote takes place tonight or not will be dependent upon the consensus and will of the committee. So just wanted to get that out of the way right at the top of the hour. I know we're just getting the Airtable form going. If someone has a comment or a question that is not related to an agenda item, we will circle back and look at that unrelated item at the end of our informational updates, just to give you time to start putting anything in. So if it is unrelated to an agenda item, please put that in now. If it is related to an agenda item, we will try to look at it when we get to the agenda item, but I'm just forewarning you in advance. We may not be able to do this extensive public Q&A that we did at our last meeting. With all of that housekeeping out of the way, sorry that was longer than normal. Bill, Superintendent update.
Yes, I have received this evening about 6:15 the email from the Commissioner's office detailing our process for submitting our final voted plan on August 10th. I have forwarded that to all of you, and I hope you'll have a chance to take a look at that. There is a template that needs to be completed by myself. I did submit the initial draft on July 27th. I want to remind everyone that graduation is this Friday at 10 a.m. Generally falls within about a 2-hour time frame. We are thrilled to be able to appropriately recognize the outstanding class of 2020. Couple of requests is that you please observe social distancing that we know is necessary, and I'm going to ask everyone to please mask up. As we all know, masks have been key to mitigating the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and we hope that everyone will have a mask with them and be wearing it, certainly. But we look forward to that great event. We know it's delayed from the normal June timeframe, but it will be equally as exciting and congratulatory in nature. And that's all I have for tonight.
If I can jump in right before you, Carrie, on the graduation note, I do want to state we've had a number of emails and messages from community members who are concerned about hearing about large gatherings, hearing about graduation parties. I've had some people go as far as to say, can you please stop these parties from happening? We're the Westford Public School Committee, and neither we nor the superintendent, nor the high school principal can control what private gatherings do or don't occur. I think all we can do is ask for those who are holding private gatherings, please do so responsibly. Please follow directions from the Board of Health. Please wear masks. Please observe social distancing, the same rules that we are trying to implement for the graduation ceremony itself. There has been concern in very nearby communities about outbreaks from gatherings. We're just asking everyone, as much as we want to very much honor the class of 2020, we also want to protect the community, and we want to give a fighting chance to the class of 2021 and all of the classes beyond to have as much in-person school as is possible this year. So please follow the directives of the Board of Health, and as much as we can encourage, while not require that, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just clarify something? I know we said we hope everyone wears masks. Would people be permitted to be admitted? That rhymes. Without a mask?
We're going to ask that everybody has a mask unless they state, Chris, that they have a specific health accommodation that they need. And again, we wouldn't push that envelope with the person, but we would certainly ask them to consider using it. And we have every message that I've put out, I've asked people to make sure that they socially distance and wear a mask if at all possible.
Should I go right into it, Gloria? Okay. Well, I just want to let you all know that Westford Public Schools has qualified this year for Title I grant funds. This is a federal grant program that looks at our low income data, and there's a particular threshold that we did meet last school year. And as a result, we are receiving $82,641. That's a very small amount of money, relatively speaking, comparing to surrounding towns, but it is money that we get this year that we did not get last year. So come October, that grant, along with our Title IIA grant and some others, are due, and I will certainly inform you on how we're looking to utilize those funds. There are very specific criteria that we have to follow, which schools get the funds and which students would be able to access whatever it is that we're using these funds for. So we'll continue the communication there, but I just wanted to let you know that we are now a Title I school district. And I just wanted to very quickly express my appreciation to Maida and Ian for their forum last week, the Race in Westford Schools, a student and alumni sharing session that they moderated. The stories were certainly moving, they were uncomfortable, and they were eye-opening. And I think it is a wonderful continuation to the discussions that have to be had in our schools and beyond. I'm partnering with some surrounding area assistant superintendents, and Bill and I have discussed this quite a bit, that there are particular ready-made protocols that can help support curriculum leaders in establishing a team and vetting the curriculum that we use here, looking through the lens of diversity. And is this really lending itself to the diverse population that we have here in Westford? So that's something that we look forward to undertaking this school year. But again, to Maida, to Ian, and everybody who shared their story, very, very impressive young men and women there. So thank you all for that.
Finance update, Ingrid, or is it all later in the agenda?
Most is later. I just did want to say one thing just to maybe reinforce some of the tough decisions that we all had to make in the spring. So I've heard from 2 different communities that are now in litigation with their bus company because they did not pay, and also have no buses available for this fall. So I just did want to reinforce that I think we made the right decision. You made the right decision, so thank you.
Thank you for advising us on that. Thank you. School committee update. Anything? Okay. Circling back, for those who are watching the Q&A, I'm not able to have it up on my screen at the moment. So is there any topics in the Q&A that aren't related to an agenda item at this time? All right, I'm seeing some heads. Okay, then I'll turn it back to Bill and his team to discuss reopening and where we are.
Yes, thank you, Gloria. And first of all, thank you for taking the time to read through the rather voluminous reopening plan that the reopening committee put together. We're proud of that, and we're also thankful to you for spending the time. There was a lot of material in there, and I know you've gone through it thoroughly. Tonight, we're going to present, we'll be as brief as possible because we want to have the opportunity for you to ask questions. Be as brief as possible in explaining the hybrid model. The first thing I'd like to say in introducing what we are going to be addressing is that we know that there is no perfect plan. There is no plan of the three, full return, hybrid, or full remote, that meets the needs of everyone. For every comment, positive comment about a hybrid plan, you'll get someone who is not in favor of it on occasion. And so what we tried to do is put together a plan that met what we thought was the educational and think of the educational needs of students, all the while complying with the DPH, the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Education's guidance to limit the size of cohorts, limit the movement of cohorts, and most specifically, they indicated minimize the opportunities for larger exposure of students to one another. And so that is sort of the nexus behind the plan that was developed by the Teaching and Learning Committee and supported by myself. Hopefully you'll support it, but if you don't, we understand that you are making the decision on this based on the information we present to you. So with that being said, Carrie and I will kind of tag team it. She will address most of the issues since she was the chair of the Teaching and Learning Committee on the hybrid model recap.
There we go. So Bill, did you want me to kick it off?
If you would, please. Yep.
Sure. So just a recap of what we had mentioned last week. Our hybrid model, there are many, many different ways to develop a hybrid model. So there's certainly more than one way to skin this cat, but the proposal that you have before you is one that we felt as though after going through many different variations was the best model for the reentry to school during this time. So just to remind you, there's a combination of in-person and remote learning experiences. And within the remote, there's synchronous and asynchronous, which synchronous, we're talking about the teaching and learning happening at the same time. So it's live instruction, sometimes in person, sometimes remotely. And then asynchronous is when the teaching and the learning happens not at the same time. And so teachers and students aren't on together or in person together at the same time. So there's a mixture of both. In order to reduce the amount of students that we have in the school at one time, we separated the students in half, and we will be assigning half of the students to pod A and half of the students to pod B. And you'll see in the model and in the schedule, pod A will be in the building at some times, and that's the time where pod B is working remotely, asynchronously on their own, and then vice versa. Also, our model has a week on, week off pattern. This is except for preschool, who will have their own schedule that Courtney Moran is working on now, and I think she had finished up. So the first week, for example, if we took Pod A, and Pod A is in school during the entire first week, where Pod B is at home. So Pod A in this scenario, it's their week of in school, and the students would follow an early release day schedule in the morning, meaning that they would be dismissed partway through the day. It's more than half of a day. So that's why we call it early release versus half day. And it's prior to lunchtime. Students would have the opportunity to purchase lunch or get their lunch if they are a free lunch qualified student, and they could take that lunch home. We would have transportation home at that time, again, similar to what we do currently on the early release day. After their 90 minutes time to sort of decompress, travel home, eat lunch, then they log back on for the remainder of the day, where there's asynchronous work to be done for the duration of the rest of the school day. There is an opportunity where it might be synchronous during that time, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So then meanwhile, while Pod A has their in-school week, Pod B has their week of learning that's out of school. And that includes students learning remotely, asynchronously, for the first part of the day, because the teachers are working with their Pod A counterparts live in school. Then at home, they have a lunch break. Then that afternoon session, the Pod B students would have the opportunity to log on and work with their teachers. It would be a required attendance to work with their teachers live and have direct instruction during that afternoon. I believe it ends up being about 90 minutes in the second part of the day. Sometimes teachers may choose to have during that time their Pod B students in their afternoon, but also want to welcome their Pod A students at the same time, so they have the full class remote going on at the same time. But we want to provide the teachers with that flexibility, because there may be times where the B group, the B Pod students in the afternoon, who haven't been in school all day, they've been doing their work and learning asynchronously, may need something more tailored and targeted to them. So it may include an afternoon session with Pod A and B, or it may just be the afternoon session with Pod B. So since our last conversation with you, where we were introducing this, every single day, every single hour, we continue to make adjustments, to talk to more people, to get more feedback. So there are a couple of just updates we want to share with you. Last time when we presented, we were talking about exploring ways to, or we had talked about splitting pods A versus B based on last name in the alphabet. And now we're looking at identifying Pod A versus Pod B geographically instead. And that, we believe, will help with transportation, because the students who are going in together will live near one another. And we also think that this will be conducive to neighborhood partnerships at home. So if parents in their off week would like to get their students safely together to work together, then they have the opportunity to do that more likely than they would if their next door neighbor is on a alternating week. Also, we have heard feedback regarding the kindergarten model. And the kindergarten model, just to refresh your memory, is that on week, off week. It is based on the early release day and stops there. So it's more like a half-day kindergarten model, which is actually about 45 minutes more than what half-day is now for the in-person time. But when we were looking at this hybrid model, we felt as though we couldn't justify collecting tuition or charging fees for this program, because none of the extra that would come with students being full day would be having students in the classroom off with teachers. So during that extra time, being 5 years old, it would be remote, and parents would have to be right by their side and helping them get on. And certainly during those asynchronous times when their counterparts are in school, it would be very much parent supported and driven, even though of course the activities and assignments would be given to the teacher. So of course there is concern about that, and we anticipated that. We heard it loud and clear, and we revisited it about 100 times since, and just don't really see another way around it. But what we are looking to do is, there are your APOD students, for example, their week in the classroom, they're in their classroom for the duration of the early release day time. And we can utilize the teaching assistants, because in every kindergarten classroom, there's a TA, teaching assistant, that helps support that classroom. So what we'd like to do is have that teaching assistant assigned to, at some predetermined time of day, meet up with the B-Pod kids who are at home and offer some sort of morning meeting, some sort of, remember, this is what we did yesterday or last week, and here's what you're going to be expected to do today. So it's just a way for them to feel connected in a live way during their off weeks, because kindergarten in the current model does not have that afternoon session live with teachers that the B-Pod does in grades 1 through 12. So as a result, one of the issues, rightfully so, the concerns with the week at home is that they have no live connection at all. And so this way we can help bring them together. They can talk about the weather, they can do calendar and things of that nature, so that the students continue to stay connected with their peers and with their school live. So the third update we wanted to share was partnerships for remote learning centers. And our goal here is, we know that the hybrid model can be disastrous for some families in terms of their work schedules. And it's very, very inconvenient. We know that. So the superintendent had thought about working with different centers throughout Westford, and the goal is to partner with local organizations to support childcare concerns for families. So while we can't have all students in, could other facilities be set up to help support the afternoon asynchronous remote learning when students are dismissed at the early release day time? And Bill has scheduled a meeting with, I believe, 4 groups to start discussing this, and that meeting will take place on Monday. Mm-hmm. And then we would have at dismissal time a bus stop at those partner locations to make it easy for a child to be transported, or to transport a child from their school to this other partner location that will be set up for remote learning. It won't be like an after-school program, rec department program, because students are expected to be in school. So it would be a place where they are supervised, and it can be set up for their continued remote learning for the remainder of that day. So that's one way that we are looking to reach out to help support and assist with the child care burden that a hybrid model brings on families. And then lastly, we had updated some of the details in the Remote Learning Academy option. This, just to refresh, this is the option for families who, if we do go hybrid, they have an option to not send their students. And if their children have health issues that make them more vulnerable with the virus, then they can work with their pediatrician and determine if this is the best model for them. Or if there are people who are simply too fearful and there isn't a medical condition that leads that fear, and it's just parents are worried, and those parents too are welcome to take advantage of this Remote Learning Academy option. one of the most difficult things for families was that we weren't able to share a whole lot of details about that, because what we needed first is a number of potentially interested families or students in order to properly plan for what this might even look like. But it would be a program through Westford Public Schools, and I think now it's starting to take a little bit more shape now that we got the most recent survey results back. So in regards to Remote Learning Academy, most courses will be taught by WPS staff where feasible. Depending on enrollment at each grade level, this model would have students participating in, it could be one or a mixture of these three main options. Live remote sessions on the same hybrid schedule, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a minute. Live streaming with the appropriate technology so that the teacher is teaching the live students and some remote students are streaming and can see what the teacher's doing with the full class. And there's also an option, and I listened to a conference call with DESE today where there are virtual learning platforms. We're thinking right now this would be an opportunity for high school students more likely, and maybe needed for some high school students more likely than middle school and elementary. But they are partnering with Edgenuity, Florida Virtual School, Tech Academy, and these are online either platforms or full-blown online schools that we could also consider for some students who choose this option. In the preliminary results of the Remote Learning Academy, I just kind of want to give one example so that we can start to wrap our minds around what we're talking about, because all three of those are great, but at what point do you expect the live streaming versus not? And so I'm going to pick out grade 2 at the Robinson School. There are 22 students at the Robinson School second grade that have selected right now on the most current survey results to not return to school in the hybrid model and to select the Remote Learning Academy. So if there are 5 second grade sections at the Robinson, and 22 is about a typical class size, then 4 can run in the regular hybrid model, and that 5th teacher could be designated as the Remote Learning Academy teacher for grade 2. And those 22 students could also be split into Pod A and Pod B and follow the same schedule as their peers who are on the hybrid in school. So Pod A students in that virtual second grade classroom would be live with their teacher for the week. And then Pod B would get the afternoon teacher time. Then the following week, the Pod B students would be live with their teacher. Same thing as the regular hybrid model that we're proposing, but those live with your teacher aren't in the physical classroom. They're on a live interactive site, just like what we're doing right now. So in that case, it would be very close to mirroring exactly what the rest of the second grade teachers are doing. One other example we have, in sticking with Robinson, in grade 1, we have 15 students who have chosen remote. Well, 15 doesn't quite cut it as a full class size. So that teacher who is designated as a remote learning teacher may have a class size of 22, which is very typical. And the 7 live students are in Pod A, and the 15, depending on how the numbers work out, students are in Pod B. So on the Pod A weeks, when those students are coming in, then those students are live, and there's 7 of them, just like our typical hybrid model that we've introduced. And then on the second week, the Pod B students are live with that teacher, and it's live remote, just like what we're doing right now. So those are the types of things that we are thinking about. There may be some electives at the high school level that we would be able to live stream, and depending on student schedules. So we're really going to take the students and look at their schedules and see what makes the most sense. And there might be some students who we suggest, a virtual learning platform like Edgenuity, and Edgenuity that does have a Westford Academy teacher of record who's supporting this, but it's an online platform and content. And we have the option to consider a full online school for students who may need that as well. So there's those kind of three types of things that we're able to work with, because it will be much more difficult at the high school level, because it's not just one class the way it is at the elementary, and it's not just putting all these remote learning students on one team and do the same thing with a team at the middle school levels. So the additional flexibility will depend on the student's schedule. Currently, at each grade span, we have about 200 students who have selected Remote Learning Academy, and it's a total of 857 students based on the last survey who are looking to move in this direction. So we found that to be interesting. Turn it over to you, Bill.
Yes, I want to present to you the results of the parent survey that was recently conducted. And I want to thank the nearly 3,900 parents who responded to the survey. This first graph is just simply a breakdown of the percentage of the respondents. So, Kerry, we can go to the next slide. This data represents all of the respondents across the entire district, and I do have a little bit more granular breakdown that I will present to you on grade spans. But of the 3,899 respondents, over 2,900, or 75.9%, indicated that their child will be returning to school in September with the hybrid model. 22%, or 857, selected the Remote Learning Academy, and 82 parents decided that they would be either homeschooling or enrolling their child in a private school. And please keep in mind, once again, for the public, if you are going to homeschool your child, you must apply for that and present documentation in terms of what your curriculum is going to look like to Dr. Cleary. That is the process that we have always used in the school system. You see, the school committee in every community is responsible for the education of every child within the borders of a community, whether they attend the Westford Public Schools or a private school, a charter school, or a home school. They have to be accountable in terms of where they are and what they're doing and how they're doing it. So please keep that in mind if you do anticipate homeschooling your child. To break the total number down a little bit more with granularity, at the K-2 level, 70.3% of the parents have indicated that their children will be returning to the hybrid model. 25.3% have chosen the remote instruction. Most of those parents who have chosen remote instruction have done so because they're concerned about the health of their child. Maybe some immunocompromised condition that could be in the household or with an extended relative. And so that's something we don't necessarily get into deeply. It's up to the parents to choose that. At grade 3 through 5, 67.7% of the parents said that their children will be returning to school with a hybrid model. 29.7% indicated that their child would be educated remotely. At the middle school, 76.5% of our respondents indicated that the child or children will be attending the school for the hybrid model, where 22.5% prefer the remote model. And at Westford Academy, 84% of the parents indicated a desire to have their child or children, if they have multiple children at Westford Academy, return under the hybrid model, 15% learning remotely. Next slide, please. We did also survey the parents on lunch participation and transportation. And interestingly, about 80% of the respondents indicated that they would not be participating in the lunch program, with the remaining, or approximately 603 students, participating in the lunch program. So still a significant, fairly significant number of students. In terms of transportation, and we know this is a concern to parents across the state, across the region, across the nation. 47.2% said the child will not be using the bus for transportation. About 40% indicated that their child will use the bus every day. Another 12.4% indicated sometimes, which is generally the trend in terms of when we're talking about sometimes. It all depends on weather conditions, sports, a variety of issues in terms of some children riding the bus on some days and some children not riding the bus. Now, very importantly also, the special education vans will be transporting students, 33 students out of the 37 that we're currently transporting will utilize our special education vans. So some concern, obviously, about transportation. We have a plan in place and working with the bus company to be sanitizing the buses between runs. And we feel that's essential. And certainly at the end of the day with the end of the bus runs also. So we're trying to think of everything that needs to be done. I think we have thought of everything that needs to be done in terms of trying to maintain the health and safety of both our students and our staff in this particular model. Okay.
Okay. So the decision you have before you is whether or not to support the superintendent's recommendation for the hybrid model as it's written, which is the alternating weeks. It's full days of school in terms of work, but the in the school day is early release. And I just want to share more detail than when we were giving you kind of the overview of the plan as to how we landed on this model. So the rationale that we have is first and foremost the health and safety of our students. And it's very easy to get caught up in just thinking about academics. We are a school and having to shift into this, how many hours can we get students in? How many hours can we give them, their courses and connect with them? So we have all of these sort of different and almost competing interests in some ways floating around. And we really had to then say, okay, what is our priority? And our priority is to try to get students back. And it's to try to get students back in a way that is safe and will minimize the spread. And the simple math is less time equals less spread, as long as we can have an educationally sound alternative to being face-to-face. And we feel as though we have done that and can do that. So the ultimate goal was to provide a program that's educationally sound while increasing safety and decreasing risk. So when we're looking at the health and safety, having the full week model versus some of the other models, we have the ability, if a student does get COVID-19, It's easier to contact trace if just that cohort of students were in the building for an entire week. Some other models, many other surrounding districts, and even some questions from school committee members, parents, were, why not do something shorter term in terms of in-person education, where you do, pod A on Monday and Tuesday, then a remote day for everybody, and then pod B on Thursday and Friday. And if we have 1 week with the same cohort, contact tracing would be much more manageable. So we have to be prepared for these things. Continuing on with health and safety, lunch without masks increases the likelihood of spreading the virus. And we will certainly do our due diligence at all times where there's students in the building to make sure that they are socially distanced. But there's no doubt that this serving lunch would add an extra layer of risk. Additionally, being in the school for 6 hours or 6.5 hours, depending on the level, for the entire day increases the contact points. And we felt as though it was imperative that we try to minimize that. And if you're in for 6 hours, there's more hallway travel, there's more bathroom visits, nurse visits, there's more students rotating through classrooms instead of visiting, 3 classrooms, you may be visiting 4 or 5 at the high school level. So for those reasons, we felt as though it was safest to do half day.
Carrie,
Then, yep.
a comment on that? Those 3 items right there speak to, as I indicated initially, one of the goals of the Department of Public Health, and that is to minimize the likelihood of increased contact of students. And the contact tracing is very important. It is on an individual basis. If a child or a staff member were to test positive, there is no automatic default decision in terms of, do we exclude or quarantine students in that surrounding area, the whole class, the whole school. It is on a very individual basis. And I've covered that numerous times with the health department. And, we do have, if you have any questions on that, Jeff Stevens, our health department director, and Gail Johnson, the town's nurse, who have been just outstanding in working with us in trying to navigate through what plan is most advantageous. And so, as Carrie said, and in the operations committee, we talked about it extensively. How do we minimize contact? And as the day, I think I've mentioned before, as the day progresses, if we had children in for a full 6-hour day, the amount of time from masks breaks, the amount of time that students and staff are desiring to take their mask off, have some break time, do some movement. If you net that out, in essentially that second half of the instructional day, you really come very close to equaling what a child receives in direct instructional services on an early release schedule.
Bill, and we did the math. It ends up being from 1 to 2 hours per week that you would gain of direct instruction that you would gain if we did the full day. Mm-hmm. So it's deceiving. People are just chunking it into half day versus full day. Oh, that's 50% of the instructional time. And that is not at all the case. It's 1 to 2 hours per week, depending on the level and the different schedule between elementary, middle, and high school. But it is not a significant amount. Right. So student well-being is the next piece. And this is where, the staff, the administrators are just thinking to what school is like under normal circumstances. And for some of our wiggly worms that, are taking the arms out of their sleeves and the shirts going around and round and, trying to work on keeping the shirt on as it's swinging around a child's body. It will be very difficult for masks to be worn all day. It'll be uncomfortable. And it's one of those many things on paper that looks just fine. It's safe. Kids are doing it now. They're wearing masks over the summer, but for a 6 to 6.5 hour day, certainly with mask breaks, is a very, very high expectation for our students. And the question is, is it a feasible one? The bullet number 2, students will be in a school environment with much less social opportunities than they're used to. So what we don't want to be doing is having to constantly be reminding students over and over to keep their distance from one another. They're used to being social. We want them to be social. That's what we've sort of been training them to do in school. The more professional development we have is about how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to socialize, and they aren't going to have that ability. And coming in with those changed expectations for part of the day instead of all of the day sets them up for better success. If we did a full day, students would be eating lunches basically alone, with less freedom to move in conversations with peers. Remember, they have to be 6 feet apart at least because there's no masks. They have to be facing in the same direction. And the reality of that setting, while sure on paper we could make it work and we could put X's where students should be, but thinking of our kids, bringing that to life, we felt as though we didn't have the heart to propose something that doesn't account for these parts that are through the lens and the eyes of a child. And then where am I? The last one, again, children will have control of their bodies for some part of the day, many of them, and then it begins to fade over the course of the day. And again, we don't want to have to be constantly trying to condition students to not be children because they're getting too close to their peers or, forgetting to remain in their 6-foot, radius bubble. So them being able to have that discipline and structure internally at 2 o'clock is a very different expectation than asking them to do that at 9 o'clock in the morning.
So, essentially, every time I've thought of this, quite honestly, I think of boiling down a certain liquid, whether it's a syrup or some sort of mixture that boils out all of the extraneous liquid and leaves a concentrate. And what we're trying to do is remove as much of the possibilities for movement and for contact throughout the day and focus that early release on the essence of instruction with minimum, the minimum need for mask breaks, the no lunches that are unmasked in the classroom. And so if you think it through carefully, this can work, it can work well, and it can replicate what we would customarily think of as a full day of education.
So here are the final 2 categories. So in terms of educationally sound, we feel as though, well, you can count hours on a table if you're comparing the 2. And as I said, direct teaching hours, there's not that much more with the transition time that we'd have, the time for lunch and extensions for hand washing, all of those new protocols and procedures. The direct teaching time is not that different between the 2. And all of the time in this model where teachers are connecting with students, they are doing so in a very valuable, targeted way around the instruction versus, a full day, you're incorporating all of these other extended transitions. Again, the lunch and that whole process is elongated because of having to hand wash and sanitize. So in terms of educationally sound, we No, again, on paper, the hours could look different, but in real life, many students will have difficulty in a relatively static environment for 6+ hours per day. We have to move furniture out of the classrooms to fit the desks in so that they're 6 feet apart. So there are classrooms with desks and a teacher's desk, and that is it. And not a whole lot of opportunity to go to this area of the room or go to that area of the room. So it's static. And we think we would never ask teachers or suggest that teachers set up classrooms in this way under normal circumstances. It's not conducive to best practice in child development. So having them do that for part of the day versus the full day is a more realistic expectation, again, through the eyes of children. This model has students having live contact with teachers and staff every single day. So when students are in, if pod A, it's their week in, and they are live with the teachers for that part of the day up until the early dismissal time, then they go home, they're asynchronous. But then during that afternoon time, the teachers then touch base with their B pod students and have live, targeted, tailored, small group, because it's half the class, instruction for that cohort of students. So in other models where you're doing hybrid full day, there are days where the students don't get anybody because the teachers are teaching the live students full day, the in-person students full day. So we like this model that it does have students connecting with teachers 5 days a week, whether you're in-person week or whether it's not in-person week, your remote week. The third bullet there is the remote group, time with the teacher, a small group and targeted, I did say that. And then lastly there, if a student is absent on a given day, assuming for non-COVID related, they don't have to quarantine, it's just an absence. If it's a week-long model, they are able to pick up where they left off, or they have an entire week, and one day out of that week feels like less of an impact, or would be less of an impact to students than if they had a 2-day in-person week and had to miss 50% or one of those 2 live days. So we feel as though we could just kind of scoop them back up and get them back on track, with it being 5 days in a row with the same cohort of students. And in addition, it feels as though students won't feel the pressure, oh my goodness, but this is the one of 2 days I get to see my, AP teacher. So I need to get in even though I've got an appointment, or even though I'm not feeling well, when we should be, encouraging people to stay home. So we think that gives some breathing room, having those 5 consecutive days. And then lastly, there are a couple of budget items. This wasn't a huge consideration, but we would not be responsible for not bringing this into the fold. And I say it wasn't a huge consideration because the teaching and learning subcommittee, we were charged with coming up with something that makes sense and is realistic. But of course, we then had to look out, so what would these models cost? And if we went full day and had to serve lunch, believe it or not, we had principals who had to request an entire lunch room's worth of desks, to purchase desks that we currently don't have, because the round tables do not allow for students to be 6 feet apart and sitting in the same direction. At the Abbott School, they do have those long, skinnier sort of tables with the bench seats. And in each one of those, because you can't sit students on both sides, each one of those you can fit 2 children. So there'd be a lot of cafeteria, whether it's in the cafeteria or gymnasium, lunch furniture to comply with the social distancing that's necessary. We would also need to think about adding supervision at lunch, because we probably couldn't fit the kids. In some schools, we couldn't fit the kids, even if we made more lunches with less students, in one area. So The preferred method would be keep kids in classrooms. Our desks are 6 feet apart, so let them eat in classrooms. And our teachers have, it's contractual, a duty-free lunch period. So there wouldn't be any time or opportunity for them to be off having their lunch. And even if they did, space is an issue, because now you've got all of these teachers who are on lunch break and they don't have their classrooms because their students are there. So we have meeting rooms, but 6 feet apart, no masks, may not be feasible there. And then we would need people who are available now that students are chopped up into classrooms, you know, the cohorts are separated into classrooms, then we would need more people to monitor classrooms because students are separated into those separate rooms. And then lastly, in a half-day model, if there were a situation like a teacher who needs to be quarantined, you know, we're talking right now about, well, all of the remaining remote pieces, if the teacher's not ill, just quarantining, could be taught remotely, and the need for a substitute would just be during that portion of the day that students are in versus the entire school day. So it would be easier for principals to get coverage if it were a part of the day versus the full day. So for those reasons, we do have, we are absolutely in support of what we had originally proposed to the school committee for that hybrid model. And I just wanted to share that we also sent a survey out to staff members, and there were 726 respondents, and they were pretty much distributed proportionally amongst the schools. And I think the big takeaways here were these kind of 3 questions. We also asked about professional development and what they need. I didn't include that in these slides because for the purposes of your decision making, I just wanted to make sure that you had this information too. And there were 3 statements that we asked staff to either to scale them, whether they strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree. So what I did was I took the agree and strongly agree, the percentage of each statement, and put them together. So the percentages you see are the percentages of teachers in each one of those grade spans that agree with the statement that's listed. So the first statement is, I feel the hybrid model appropriately balances the academic, social, emotional wellness, and safety of students. So in all cases, you can see from pre-K to 2 up through 9 through 12, it's split. The majority feel as though they agree with that statement, that it does appropriately balance those 3 areas. Next is, I feel the hybrid model, which is the one we're proposing, is the preferred reopening model of the 3 schools. So you can see, again, staff is split, just like parents and families are split. And so at the pre-K to 2 and the 6 through 8, it's half and half. Grades 3 through 5 and 9 through 12, it's slightly below half in agreement with that. And then I believe it was requested that we also ask whether or not the fully remote model is the preferred opening model of the 3. And of the 3, I had in parentheses a full return, hybrid, and then fully remote. So you can see pre-K and middle school are slightly below slightly below half agree that fully remote is the preferred model, whereas 3 through 5 and 9 through 12, it's more than half who feel as though they'd prefer to go fully remote, which is not a surprise. We have, and I know the school committee has received communications from the WEA board, as well as, and that's certainly right in line with the Massachusetts Teachers Association and their position. So I just wanted to make sure you had that information as well. So that is all. I'm going to turn my screen back so I can see your faces.
Bill, anything else at this time, or are we ready to address committee questions and concerns?
No, the only, and you can defer this until later. There was a question came up at the last meeting about the decision-making metrics. How would we know and when would we know to shift from one model of learning to another? If you'd like, I could briefly review that now while Jeff and Gail are here, or if you prefer, I could do that later.
Why don't you go ahead and address that now?
All right, thank you. And in my conversations with Jeff and Gail, as I've said, they have been with us every step of the way throughout this whole plan development and continue to be. One of the things that they have indicated to me is that there is no easy, hard and fast numerical metric to focus on in terms of if the daily rate is now 2.2% or 1.3% or 4.6%. First of all, we have to look at it over both a short-term and a long-term period of time. And so what I have come up with here is that prior to making a recommendation to you, and anything other than an executive order from the governor saying we're either going to do full return or full remote, here's the process that I'm recommending, and that I think Jeff and Gail feel comfortable with is I would consult on a regular basis, a couple of times a week. I'd look at it over a 30 to 60 day period, the trend that's reported in the COVID-19 number of cases in Middlesex County and in Westford. Feeling that it's important to focus more geographically on our area than other areas that might have other conditions operating that provide higher numbers or lower numbers than what we are experiencing. We would take a look at the 30 to 60 day trend in the number new daily confirmed and suspected COVID-19 hospital admissions. These are all data series that are available from the Department of Public Health dashboard, okay? Then a 30 to 60 day trend in the total number of COVID-19 cases by age group, because there has been a lot of talk about the numbers of children in certain age ranges and adults in certain age ranges that are more susceptible to the contracting the virus. We would look at certainly, as I said, the specific data to Westford. We would look at that almost every other day in terms of my talking with Jeff, Gail, and if necessary, the entire Board of Health. And that in my discussions with Jeff and Gail, we would put together a COVID-19 advisory committee that would be made up of myself, Jeff Stevens, Gail Johnson, our school nurse leader, Joan Mitchell, facilities director, Paul Fox. We would also have a couple of other nurses, Sue Hanley, certainly, who is on the Board of Health, on the committee, also school transportation manager, Jen Piper. And we would consult with our consulting physicians at Pediatric West. And so the important thing to keep in mind is there is no specific magic number, a metric that's associated here. It's with a decision. It's a conversation with health professionals in terms of what appears to be safe based on a trend of 30 to 60 days in this particular region. And first of all, I want to thank once again Jeff and Gail for being here, because they were very willing to be here if you had any questions for them.
Okay, I think there's a lot of ground we need to cover here. For starters, I'm just going to give some of my initial feedback, and then I'm going to throw it open to committee members for their comments. I will state up front, I am frustrated, and I am frustrated for two reasons. The first reason I am frustrated is that Some of the information that was presented tonight, school committee has not seen previously. We got some basic information about the parent survey results earlier today, late this afternoon, and did not have any of that breakdown data that was presented tonight. We also had not seen any results from the staff survey until this evening. School committee also presented administration with numerous questions after the release of the 91-page report. We submitted those questions on July 26th and did not receive answers on those questions until today. I have not even had a chance to review all of the answers that were provided by administration. So I will state for myself as one of 7, and I would love to hear from other committee members on this, that I am not prepared to take a vote this evening on a preferred model. My second source of frustration is there has been significant feedback from the community and from the committee about concerns with the particular hybrid model that has been proposed. And I'm not an educator. I have to defer to Carrie and her team and to all of the educators who put together this plan. But I am concerned based on the extensive feedback we've received from working parents that this is an incredibly difficult model for their families to manage and for students to access. So even while it may be the optimal teaching model, and for some students who are able to access that model, I have no doubt that it would be incredibly successful. But I am very concerned for those students who are unable to access this model. I'm very concerned with the inequities that we may be creating and the difficulties that we may be imposing on these families and their students. So I was hoping to see in the presentation tonight a bit of the pros and cons of this hybrid model that is being proposed and some of the other hybrid models which we know surrounding communities are using. Again, I respect your judgment in that this is the one you're recommending, but I guess I had hoped to see a little bit more balance and pros and cons about could we make other versions work as well that might strike a balance between some of your concerns and interests and that maybe made the model more accessible to working families. Committee members, please chime in. Those are my 2 initial thoughts. Valerie?
Yeah, can I just clarify, are we going to hear any financial information tonight? And should that be shared right now before we kind of ask questions and then have to double back and ask more questions, or?
We can send some to you.
I don't know what financial information is available. That again, if there's financial information to present tonight, the committee hasn't seen it previously.
So I do have some. I have to put the huge caveat. This is like, I think I described it like creating forecasts in the sand at high tide. Things change every minute. I was getting input from of needs to cost out just today still. So, and those will continue to come as people wrap their heads around the plans and as you as a committee recommend a plan. So with that caveat, I am going to share a few slides. I did email them to Chris, so I apologize. I'm having very spotty, and I'm here at central office internet.
Do you want me to share them then? Is that
if you don't mind,
it might. Yeah, it might give me a second here.
Let's see.
Let's stall. Give me a second to find them.
I think maybe if I move it to another screen. Sorry, I apologize.
No problem.
No worries. We kind of popped you up for on the agenda. Maybe
no, I think I got it.
You guys have it? Okay.
Yeah, I have it.
Can you see my screen or is it Chris's? Sorry, I can't see anything now. Can you hear me? Sorry, I can't hear anything. Okay.
Yep, we can hear you. We had a screen share up and
All right, let me try again.
It may be gone again. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, now we've got your screen, Ingrid.
Okay, great. So, like I said, things change every minute here. So I was doing the best with the information I was given. And again, it will probably continue to change. One of the big caveats that we have to consider is that many of our costs depends on how many students end up in the buildings, and then also how many staff are available to work. Some of the roles may change depending on the models and the timing of the model. And so none of this right now takes into account potential job changes, redeploying certain functions that maybe in certain models have a role that perhaps isn't as necessary or doesn't fit into the model. All those discussions still need to be had. I know our HR department is still compiling requests from staff on accommodations, potential leaves. So this is a very fluid situation, as you know. Based on the information I did receive from the building level, all the schools have indicated that they will need additional aids to monitor the unloading of the buses. The buses would have to be unloaded one at a time, and then having a monitor escort particularly younger children to the classroom, the hallways, the bathrooms. I did initially cost this out in a 12-week period. That's kind of the period that Paul Fox is also using for purchasing PPE. We obviously don't want to say purchase enough masks for the full year in hopes that we don't need them for the full year. So we are staggering our purchases based on models and need, and don't want to overbuy. The nursing support, the head nurse has indicated that she foresees that they will need at least 3 substitute nurses a week to provide additional support. Custodial assistance, again, there are different models that I am looking into. We could hire more custodians or potentially contract out some of the custodial duties, the additional custodial duties as needed. I'll be very honest. I know Bill and Carrie won't be surprised. I do think we need to be careful hiring additional staff, just because if the model pivots and we have to go full remote, we don't want to hire people and then lay them off right now, be responsible for unemployment, for example. Again, these are very preliminary suggestions. Bus monitors is something that we have talked about to ensure that the students get on the bus, stay on the bus, keep their masks on safely while the bus driver is busy driving, but also to assist the driver in cleaning between the runs, which is a critical part of this, the health and safety protocols. Some of these costs regarding PPE this is pretty much what we have ordered, what Paul Fox has put into place so far. Again, it's for a 12-week period. There are additional things I'm sure that will be added. Masks, gowns, shields, wipes, different types of wipes, sneeze guards, the electrostatic sprayers, that would be used in the school buildings, in the buses, both for special education and the big yellow buses, to facilitate a quick cleaning, particularly with the big buses, so we don't run too far behind, hand sanitizer, etc. So when you take those two kind of 12-week costs, that's $570,000. Paul has also, as Bill, I think, has reported, is working with a company doing HVAC audits and air quality audits for each school. They're working school by school. I believe 3, maybe 4 schools have been initially evaluated. They're working very fast. And then there will be some initial remediation that Paul's already outlined. And then depending what the audits find, those costs could increase. And again, we need to evaluate what is going to provide the safest environment for staff and students, while being realistic of how much we can do to older school buildings. Carrie and Julie Boudreau and the technology team have put together a lengthy list of software and programs to support the remote learning pieces. That comes up to about $410,000. There's, Chromebook repair. In order to provide all our students with a Chromebook, we've had to pull out some of the Chromebooks that I believe, if you remember, you set a policy last spring for disposal of surplus items. We don't have any surplus anymore. It's all being deployed out to the field. So, but we have to be realistic that some of those will break. So those initial costs come to over $1 million.
Ingrid, may I note also that in talking with other superintendents in the area, that is not out of the realm of normalcy and reality. Many of them are up about $1.2, $1.4, $1.5 million. School systems, and in some instances, are smaller than ours. So yes, that is a large figure, but in perspective, it is no more certainly than most other school districts, and in some cases less than many other school districts.
And then I do have to include this slide. I know I've verbally mentioned this before, and trust me, I bring it up at almost every meeting, both with the town and internally within the school department, is the revenue that we have at risk. As you know, we spend a lot of time talking about fees, and when we do our budget development, and we have a significant amount, $1.945 million of revenue that we potentially will not have next or this year to support our budget. And unfortunately, as of right now, that hopefully will change with legislation, but right now, any of the CARES Act funding that we have received and cannot be used to replace revenue. So we're hoping that those restrictions lighten up, but that is a real issue right now. So we have many salaries, particularly the kindergarten and preschool level, that are paid for by tuition, the bus fees. Bill and Carrie shared, some of the initial survey results. That's well under 50% of what we normally have for ridership. Generally, we have about over 3,000, about 3,300 bus riders, and about 65% of those riders do pay the bus fee.
So Ingrid, it's Leisha. I have a question. How much of the money that we received from the second round of the CARES Act is already spoken for, and how much can be applied to that million you were just talking about?
So none of it has been allocated yet. So for that, actually, I'll flip to the next slide. So for the Coronavirus Relief Fund school reopening grant, it's a grant as opposed to on the town side, and we do have access to those funds as well. That is a reimbursement grant. This grant is, and that's the $225 a student. We actually have to, map out how we're going to spend it and apply for it. That money is what the money is allocated for Westford, but we have until the 31st of August to apply how that money will be spent. And then the money has to be spent as of right now, unless they change it, by December 31st. So that's where it becomes very tricky if we use these funds for salaries, because it would only get us through the end of December. And I apologize, I know this is very small, and I will email this presentation to you, and we will put it on the website with a huge caveat, all subject to change. But it does lay out what this grant can be spent on, and it's really to focus on, getting the kids back to school educated. So it could be spent on staff, but also professional development and training, student services, everything from educational technology, mental health services, assessments, learning gaps, vendor services for food and transportation, building services, if we need, to rent tents or trailers, cleaning equipment, any sort of planning costs, IT costs, and then the wonderful other innovative efforts to support the safe reopening of schools. So the calls that I've been on regarding this grant, and I know others in the administration have as well, is DESE is indicating they are going to be extremely flexible with what we would consider innovative, but it does have to fall within their parameters.
Mm-hmm. May I just say, Gloria, I'm hoping that Congress will pass legislation, as we know, deals with this next round of funding, the possibility of addressing lost revenues. And that is absolutely crucial to not only us, but every other community. I mean, this is one of the biggest concerns we have, regardless of any model, is the lost revenue.
Thank you for that additional information. Just to clarify for the public, I do have to say on behalf of the committee, unfortunately, this is the first time we're seeing that information, so it is difficult for us to react to it immediately. I probably have a million questions in my head, but I also want to open the floor to the rest of the committee for their thoughts. Chris.
Thank you, Gloria. Yeah, thanks to everybody for the work that's being done. I mean, we've said it 1,000 times. There are no good solutions, but I appreciate the focus on keeping the kids safe, keeping the community safe, keeping the teacher safe, focus on educating the students, and doing that in an equitable way. So I think trying to remember that is always what we need to do. I guess my biggest questions right now center around, and I previewed this, I think, a little bit in an email to Bill and Carrie, around robustness of the system. I think the hybrid plan, as thought up and presented, makes a lot of sense. I think it's elegant in a lot of ways, and it meets a lot of the needs of balancing safety and school education and things like that. I have some questions about it, but I see the rationale behind it pretty well. I guess I'm still not sure what happens when entire classrooms go out due to COVID. And I know we've sort of waved our hands a little bit and said, well, it's case by case, things like that. But I also know that the state says that when when somebody tests positive, that anyone who's a close contact with them has to either test or quarantine for 14 days. And in their guidance, they define close contact in the elementary setting as all teachers and classmates in a class. And so to me, that says one student in a class has a positive test, everybody's out for 14 days, including that teacher. And then I start thinking about, well, what about that? That's pod A. What about pod B that teacher teaches? That's 14 days. That's just one classroom. So those are the questions I have, I think, and they bring me to the next point, which is, I think that we have to be fully prepared to do remote learning, because I think we have to expect that that's going to happen at some point. If it doesn't, great. But I'm afraid that we haven't convinced ourselves that we have a really good handle on remote learning, and that we can make it like so good, almost as good as in-person learning, as good as it can be. I feel like we're hinging our hopes on, hey, 25% of the time, the students get to do in-person learning, and that's really good, right? They're in person, that's what we all wanted. But they're in person with masks on, in desks facing forward, and without the facial expressions, without hands-on experiments for science classes. I'm not convinced that 25% is really 25% quality teaching or instruction because of just those limitations. And so to me, it tells me that our remote learning has to be excellent. We're an excellent school district. Our remote learning has to be excellent because we may and likely will have to use it. In fact, we know, even if this plan, most of the learning will be done remotely. And so I guess that's what I'm hoping to see, is more on what remote learning looks like and how we do that as well as any district in the state does that. And then it does beg the question, which I kind of hinted at here, which is, I'm not convinced that 25% in person with masks on facing forward, I'm not sure it's worth all the trouble at this point. If we already have to come up with a really good remote plan. So I guess where that leads me is to ask, could we start remote? That buys us some time to make sure we're being safe. That buys us some time to answer a huge question, which is childcare. And in an ideal world, we could decouple the childcare from the educational, but we're a community and I don't think we can afford to do that. So I think we all have to have a role in figuring out, how do we support our working families? And I'm really glad that there have already been some conversations about how do we use community organizations and care centers and things like that. I will bring this up too, because a lot of people have mentioned it in their comments, which is in the hybrid model, if you're only in school 25% of the time, if you're in other childcare centers, you are getting all kinds of outside potential contamination, which may nullify the benefits of even doing a hybrid model. So that's a question. But I do think we need to have an all-out blitz in the town, not just in the schools, but in the town, on how we're going to support our working families. Other questions I have are, if we started remote, are there students for which we would do more in person because it's required or more beneficial based on their IEPs? The other thing I would suggest is, if we start fully remote, is to have some in-person time. I think, SSPA this summer, I think that's what they did. They were mostly remote, but they did have some strategic time, because you need that time in person to get to know each other. But I would suggest that time is not much of a learning time. It's more of a social bonding, getting to know, your classmates, your teacher in an in-person setting. So I would, even with fully remote, I would like to see that. It would be, it'd be infrequent, every other week or once a week for a little bit. It wouldn't be that full hybrid, but I think that would be nice, but less than the 25% of the hybrid. And then, having a remote start would, again, give us some time to maybe ease things in. And this is where a strong remote plan is really important, so that we can flexibly move maybe some students in, maybe not the full pod A, pod B, but bring in, a quarter of students, and keep an eye on how that's going. recognizing that that may be difficult because of it's hard for people to change plans. So I think we have to think about that as well. But those are the questions I have, which, like I said, mostly go to robustness of the remote learning and how we handle that.
Chris, may I just say that we know and we certainly recognize that remote learning has to look different than what it did in the spring. And we've had a number of conversations, the importance of the committee making a decision within the next 4 or 5 days, whatever that might be, is that we start on this, we know what the target is, and then we start to address that very aggressively. As you know, we have the 10 days that the commissioner has built in at the beginning of the school year for preparation, professional development, but we want to start long before that in terms of the preparation for whatever model you approve as a committee. And so we're very, very much aware of changes that need to be made in terms of the remote learning. May I ask a question? Are you indicating that you've heard from the public that a remote model would be easier for childcare than this hybrid?
No, I don't think that's the case. I recognize that that's not the case. I'm recommending that we decouple those as best we can, and for health and safety, start remote and make sure we can do that. I guess that's the biggest thing. I want to make sure we can do that and that we have an idea of what happens when we have to shut down in-person learning, which in all likelihood, will happen. I think the best way to know if we can do that is to start that way, to force us to start remote so that we can, make sure we understand how to do that well. The childcare, no, it's harder. But I think we need to come together as a community to help attack that problem too. But I don't think, the hybrid sort of putting half the kids in half the day is really solving childcare, and it's creating a lot of other potential risks and concerns. So I would want to attack both, and I would like us to at least look at how we're addressing childcare. The other thing that somebody just brought up is, and I meant to say this, which is we also don't have to have the same model for all grade levels. So I would like to see a consideration that our K-2 especially learners and families need something different than our 9 to 12 do. And I think we're hearing that loudly and clearly from families, as far as the need for in-person. So that's another approach is to give the younger kids more in person, because the need is there, but with the older kids, maybe not as much.
Okay.
So we've got a ton of issues here already. And we're all starting to see the complexity of this problem. Chris has raised a huge range of both educational questions and health and safety questions. But before we continue on with questions and discuss more of the educational aspects that Chris has raised, I was wondering if Jeff and Gail could weigh in on a couple of points, I think, of confusion in the community. One has been some of the conflicting information that I think we've seen. If there is a positive case in a classroom, does that mean that the entire classroom is considered a close contact? And what are the kind of the domino implications of that?
Hi, and thank you for inviting me to your committee meeting. I appreciate that and the time to talk. So I am the public health nurse in town, and I do all of the contact investigations and contact tracing, case investigations and contact tracing, and in collaboration also with Sue Hanley, the school nurse, and Kathy Bordeaux, who when cases got high at one point, they came on, and so the three of us do all of the case investigations and contact tracings together. So it's been wonderful. A couple of things I just wanted to say. I pulled off a report today to bring to you guys some information on We have 174 cases, and we have under the age of 0 to 19, we have 8 males and 7 females, total of 15 kids since March 1st till today. I pulled it off today. So we have 15 kids out of the 24,000 residents we have in town. And out of all of the caseloads, that includes, senior population with 174. So we've got, relatively speaking, lower numbers in the whole picture. With that being said, as a case investigator, what happens is I get information from the state. All test results from a positive person goes into the state lab. I get it into the database that I share with the state. And then when it gets into the database, I then begin my investigation, and I will contact that positive person. In that conversation, I will get information on who was their close contacts. That consists of somebody that spent more than 15 minutes and closer than 6 feet with somebody. And that's considered a close contact. So when you're talking about in classroom, if you do such a thing as like pods or little groups, that one little group would be considered so you'd have the one positive kid, let's say, and then the little kid, the kids around them would all, so 10 days for a positive person until symptom resolution. So it's 10 days for the sick person or the asymptomatic person, and 14 days because it could take 2 to 14 days for the virus to show up. So the recommendation on contacts are, if you are exposed to a positive case, you are suggested to get a COVID test from the 2 to 14 days from exposure. But I want to say that even though the test may be negative, they still need to continue with the 14-day quarantine, based on the fact that there's 2 things that I tell every person on the phone. 2 things. 1, it could really be negative. Or number 2, it could be negative because the viral load at the time of the swab may not have been very high. And so you'll get a negative. So the Department of Public Health suggests, and the CDC says, let's wait out the 14 days, even though you're negative, and wait to see if that virus does show itself up to 2 weeks, even though you were tested negative. So in a whole classroom, if the teacher is COVID positive, then that teacher's out for 10 days minimum, with the 24 hours of no fever and marked improvement of symptom improvement. And then the same with students, not if they're 6 feet apart in the class, not everyone in the class, technically speaking, would be, again, it's a fine, tricky line of who the close contacts are. But it's more than 15 minutes and it's closer than 6 feet is how I have to do my case investigations based on that. DESI originally said 3 feet up to 6 feet, but I can't do contact investigations on everyone that's sitting 3 feet, because that would be the whole class. Mm-hmm. Just as Chris just finished saying, it would be the whole class. So it is a fluid situation. It's complex. Not every school would have to be closed based on that. If it becomes clusters within the school, that would be disconcerting. But if there are positive cases in the classroom, and it's because of maybe family members were exposed or something else. So it's not black and white. It just isn't. So it's very complex, but that's what the case investigations and contact tracing is what I do. And I only see Westford residents. So if there's a staff member that lives in another town, I will not see that result. It goes to the public health nurse in the town in which you reside. So I most likely would see all of the children. So if anyone tests positive or their families, then I would see that.
So presumably, if we have a staff member who tests positive, we would be relying on them to report to us. So then we could initiate the contact tracing from there, even though you wouldn't get the direct report.
That is absolutely correct.
I certainly know there were some confusions on this point, and there were some questions on what really did constitute the close contact, especially for elementary classrooms. Is there follow-ups from that explanation, Chris? I know others had questions about this as well.
DESE says, in elementary and other school situations where the students are in self-contained classrooms for an extended period, all students, staff within this cohort are considered close contacts. So, I mean, I have no expertise to say that that's true or not true, but I just know that's what they told the schools what a close contact in an elementary classroom looked like, which is a broader definition than what it sounds like we usually would do. It sounds like they're playing it more conservative in elementary classrooms.
So the CDC has to coincide with DESE. And I think there has been brought up many times in our Department of Public Health meetings, which we have every single week and a couple of them. And what the problem is, there is a discrepancy. There is a discrepancy between the CDC guidelines and what DESE is requesting. And we need to come together. I follow the CDC and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health guidelines. That is how, that's how public health nurses need to follow that. I don't know if DESE and the CDC will come up with a together plan, but they should. And I think that's the talks are there because we need to be uniform in what we're deciding. And I think that's what we have to say, not 3 feet, but 6 feet, because that's what I base everything off of contact tracing.
And committee members, that's why I originally made the decision that we would go with the CDC recommendation of 6 feet of distancing. We could not guarantee the health and safety of children and staff with 3 feet of distancing.
Correct.
Okay, I know there was so much else that was encompassed in Chris's comments, but I'm also seeing lots of other hands. Ming Chen.
Thank you, Gunnar. Well, we have Jeff and Gail here. So I want Jeff and Gail to give us an assessment on the risk level of COVID-19 in Westford. Is it low, medium, or high?
So we're not going to be able to give you an assessment of what our risk level actually is. That is an impossible task for us to do because it could change tomorrow with what we see in Maven. So what we can give you is raw data on the numbers we have and the amount of people that are ill in a certain age group. But to assign a risk level is not something that I would be willing to do, nor would I want my staff to do.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's good. But Harvard School of Business Public Health, Harvard School of Public Health actually assigned risk level, not per town level, but mostly based on the state. So Massachusetts actually it's actually one of the best contained in the country, and then Westford is one of the best contained in the state. So so definitely we're not seeing a lot of cases in Westford. We are seeing some, and then there is an uptick in the last couple of weeks probably. So I think there is something like almost impossible because we have we have the parents, a plural of parents, they want their kids back in school. We have teachers, survey, want to start remote only. I think we got to actually come together to work out a solution. Because in a moment like this, we need to actually work together instead of trying to actually hold the lines. I do think like a hybrid plan might be a good start to start with. I have some problem or questions with this particular hybrid plan. Like Chris mentioned, if we actually shift the kids from WPS to another facility in the afternoon, not just like shift the infection from one place to the other, it doesn't really solve the problem. I have been talking to various people. I think that we should seriously look into the full day hybrid plan, because based on January 27th, which is last Monday's meeting, the most asked question is how are we going to be able to make this work for working families? How is it going to actually make it equitable? Childcare is just like a side issue, right? It's more about equitable, how to make it equitable. The second most asked question is like, there are more in-person learning desired. And then the third most asked question is the time of determining and switch models. Bill, I do thank you that you gave us some guidance on when or how to switch models, because today the DICE guideline clearly states that the school district should be ready to switch between the 3 different models based on if the condition improves or worsens. So the 30 to 60 day metric, it's a good start. At least actually gave us something to work with. So we probably need to actually have a little bit more concrete. I know it's hard, but still we need to actually to figure out how we decide to switch from one model to the other. Is it like 1 cases, 2 cases, 3 cases, 0 cases? What hospitalization? I know there are all those metrics, but we got to find something to work with. The other thing which Carrie showed, the staff survey, which is coming from WPS. I know like WEA actually sent a survey today to a school committee. These two surveys, they don't agree with each other. So definitely there are some work to do to figure out why they differ so much from the WEA survey versus the staff survey. The survey from last week to the parents, a lot of parents complain about the surveys, thinking that the survey actually is only asking about the current hybrid model, remote, or homeschool. Well, a lot of parents felt that they want, the second choice is hybrid. They want full in-person. The second choice is hybrid, but they don't want this hybrid. But there is no way for them to express that until they put it in the comments section. So today, when the survey results were presented, I'm curious, is like how many people put in comments in the comments section, because that certainly takes away some of the real thinking from parents. I also have some question about the remote learning academy. So Carrie, you mentioned that, for example, at grade 2 for Robinson School, there are 22 kids. They are interested in remote learning academy, and then we divide them up into part A, part B. I'm curious, is that since remote learning, they don't have to actually go to school, why do we actually still divide up by each school? Why can't we actually look into all the grade 2 students in the entire district, and then work through there, so that we don't get into weird problems like oh, in Robin school, we only have like 10 kids, and then the other school has 30 kids, the other school have 50 kids, then try to actually figure out the teaching staff is going to be like almost impossible.
Yeah, that's a great question. People who sign up for the Remote Learning Academy still have the option to transition back to the hybrid model if they so choose. We will be asking for, a more universal time where people commit until the semester mark in January and then transition if they want to, but there may be some situations where students are going in and out. And if we go back to school, all of these have to be set up in a way that we can pivot easily from one plan to another. So if we end up going back to school, or if teachers in the Remote Learning Academy change their mind, then this would provide them with an opportunity to step foot back in the building with the teacher that they've been working with this whole time, as well as the peers that they have been working with this whole time. And so we just want to try to keep them connected to school. I think if this were an absolute year-long plan and there will be no changes, I think that that's less important, but we do want to make it students able to transition back and forth. So we thought a classroom setting feel with a teacher associated with that school would be most appropriate. And I think the numbers, though, Ming-Jen, do work out that we could do that reasonably with numbers at each of the schools.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so can you also answer the question I think Gloria mentioned between the hybrid, which we are proposing, versus the, for example, two full day hybrid? Because the benefit of, for example, 2 full day hybrid is that we can scale up and scale down easily without like coming up with a totally different bus schedule. For example, if we want to go from 2 day or 3 day or 4 day, you don't have to actually talk to the bus company or talk to parents to have their entire schedule up and down. But for half day, it's very, very difficult to scale up.
So I feel bad that the perception of the presentation was not that it had pros and cons. We actually had a separate slide for that, and we took it out about half hour before this meeting because it was redundant and we had to keep kind of repeating ourselves. So in terms of the full day model, we are concerned that students will be static in rows for a long period of time and not able to move around the way they naturally should and would in a school setting. The fact that the full day hybrid model has students obviously in full day, but then those other students aren't getting any contact with teacher, but the half day model allows all students to have live contact with teacher, whether it be in person or not. If it's high quality, as Chris mentioned, for the remote side of things, then that will be very valuable. And we would love to have students to be able to connect with their teachers every day. We also think that masks for the full day are not going to be as easy as it sounds for our students. They're uncomfortable, and I'm just thinking of all of us when we leave a meeting or come out of Market Basket, the first thing that goes is you rip off your mask because you're sick of it. And a 6 or plus hour day would be difficult for students. Lunch does pose a huge issue in terms of logistics, but as well as the concern about safety and socialization. So all of those pieces that we put on the rationale, we were hoping to convey that that is the benefit versus a full day model. So pros and cons are sort of woven into those 2 slides. You had another part, Ming-Jen, and I lost it. What?
I forgot my question.
I did too.
Yeah, so I'm curious if, like, for example, other districts, they are actually doing full days with a hybrid model. They must have the same concerns you have, but they decided to actually choose the full day hybrid model. Apparently, they weight the benefit more than the cost.
Yes.
So what causes like our district to think that it's not worth it for full day?
Right. And, you know, I know colleagues in the districts that are going in that direction, and they are thoughtful and certainly child-centered. But our conversations felt as though that those concerns were limiting factors for the people who were around the table. I do know that many districts have gone in that direction. And I know that that is, in some ways, although hybrid is very inconvenient for families, but in some ways it's more convenience for families, having students when it is their turn to go full day. And we wanted to really tease away to what our core values were and stick to those as we were developing a plan. So if it is the will of the committee to say, despite that, we understand where you're coming from, hopefully you do, but we feel as though this is a better model for Westford Public Schools, then we will produce a model that mirrors that, full day. The concerns that we have that we've stated here won't go away. But yes, other districts are doing it, and we could certainly produce that plan as well. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to I don't want to hog the screen, but I feel like I do need to say the concern that we're hearing from parents is not a matter of convenience. It is not a matter of preference. It is a matter of functionality. And I hear everything that is being saying about the educational advantages of this model, and that it enables every teacher to touch base, whether it's live, in person, or remotely, with every student every day. And I love that about that. But the feedback we are getting from working, and for students who have a parent who does not work outside the home, for students who may be in more affluent circumstances and their parents can hire in-home care for those children, for students who may be in a situation where their parent is currently working from home, they may be able to access that model. And they may be in that flip week when they're not in the building, they may be able to log on and access that teacher during that 1 to 3 time, and that could be incredibly valuable time. The thing that we have to worry about as school committee members is the student who can't access that model. What about students who are in childcare situations that it's just not feasible for them to log on to that time or access that time at all? Then have we created an incredibly difficult situation for working families during the week the kids are in the buildings because they're on that early release time every single day. And on the flip week, when their kids are outside or are not in the building, they're trying to get their kids to log on and be prepared for education during that very, the middle of the day. So in an optimal circumstance for the students who are able to access it, this sounds like a beautiful model. But for the student who's going to struggle to access this model, which frankly are the students who are most at risk during this pandemic time, that is what greatly concerns me. And I know we're all playing this balancing game, and I very much respect all of the professional opinions that are being conveyed here, but I'm struggling with how to reconcile the model that's been put before us and the needs that we're just hearing the outcry from working families. But I have to get other committee members in here to comment. Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Gloria, and thanks to the superintendent and to the assistant superintendent, everyone really who put blood, sweat, and tears into this document. So hybrid, right? What's in front of us? I like it. I'm not completely sold on it, and I'll tell you some of my concerns. First off, up front, I'll say, I mean, I feel like we could spend the whole night going over what other communities are doing. I don't think that it's necessarily productive, at least to our conversation, insofar that I feel like the superintendent and the assistant superintendent have put together a well thought out, well rationalized plan in front of us, and you know it's well reasoned in knowing that the seven of us aren't really educators, right? I'm not an educator. I don't proclaim to be, so I have to defer to the experts on that. I think my concern about the hybrid really goes to the safety aspect of it, right? I concede that Westford is a low risk community right now, or at least it seems that way. I'm concerned about our staff. I'm concerned about our teachers. I'm concerned about our boots on the ground. And I think that this idea of 6 feet works on paper, right? But a concept that one of our teachers is going to run in the opposite direction if a student falls down, you know, and is injured, and not spend time with them. It's just, I know our teachers. They're the first ones who are going to be there helping that student up, and I'm concerned about that, right? Because that's that close contact. We have started to see increases in surrounding communities, particularly in Chelmsford. I'm sure everyone saw that being reported. I forget what newspaper it was reported in. All right. Another concern that I have is a lot of our staff lives in New Hampshire. The governor issued an order, a travel order with Rhode Island. If the governor does the same to New Hampshire, what predicament are we in then? Do we lose those staff members? And maybe that's a question for Gail or Jeff once I wrap up. I think I buy Chris's reasoning, and I think I'm in line of that. I believe that we haven't put enough emphasis on the remote model right now. I think in Westford, well, at least the reason why I moved to this town was for the schools, right? We like to think of ourselves as the best. I wonder if we can put effort into that remote model and become the best remote model, right? And understanding and the aspirationally wanting to eventually get to a point where we don't have to be in that remote position, right? So if we did the remote up front and it gave us some time to ramp up that remote program, make sure that it's working perfectly, and at the same time review those numbers to make sure that they weren't on the trend upwards in surrounding communities and in the state as a whole, I think that there's a lot of usefulness there. The concern again goes back to those surrounding, those our residents who are in working class or working families, right? Like, what do we do with the students for that? And if we can all use that as a rallying cry to, you know, get behind something, and hopefully we can have some help from other town entities, I think we might come to a creative solution. But those are my thoughts, and I would appreciate it, I guess, if we can get some more information on the staff results, survey results, Carrie. I think, was it just 5 questions on it? Is that?
Yes, the other question was about professional development, and if you are not able to come back to work, let us know, and would you like to be considered for a remote only teacher if we have those in our plan?
Gotcha. And that number is currently higher for staff than we have a desire of students who are interested in the remote learning academy. Is that probably fair to say? There's more teachers who want to do remote only than there are students who want to be taught remote only. Is that?
Well, yes, I mean, you could draw that conclusion because less chose the remote learning academy from the family survey. But what the family survey didn't do is, what if the whole district went remote? Would you rather that or hybrid?
Right.
So it said, here's our hybrid model. Would you do that, or would you choose this separate remote learning academy? And yes, it was about 20% said separate remote learning academy. But in terms of the teachers, they're split, and in some cases the scale has tipped. And as Ming Jen had said, there was a survey that went out from WEA that showed greater interest in starting the year remote. I'm not sure why there is a discrepancy, but in both cases, it's the needle is tipped. It's just how far it's tipped, depending on the survey that you're looking at.
Okay, and just so I can make it clear, I don't think that we should be viewing remote as a for the rest of the year. I think that we're all in agreement, right? That our goal is to get the kids back in as most normal of an environment as possible. I wonder if it's wisest to just give ourselves a little extra time.
So there's been a mix of health questions and educational questions, and I've kind of had a request to try to separate that a little bit. I know they're so blended together, but Sean, you had a specific question and it looks like Jeff has an answer on just the specifics of how would it be handled for staff members who might be coming from New Hampshire and they're out of state, and how those rules connect. And if other committee members could also be thinking, do you have other specific informational questions for Jeff and Gail? And then maybe we can let them go and continue on with our discussions about how all of this fits together. But let's get that first answer about out-of-state teachers.
All right, so I put up into your question box the answer to that actual question. And I took this directly out of the travel order, which I'll just read for the broadcast. Persons commuting for work or school, people who regularly commute at least weekly outside of Massachusetts to a fixed place to attend school or work, and any person who regularly commutes at least weekly into Massachusetts to a fixed place to attend school or work, provided that in either case, this exception applies only to and from the person's residence and place of work or school. Workers or students who travel to any place that is not their home state for personal leisure reasons cannot rely on this exemption. So what that basically means is, for people that live in New Hampshire that work in our school system, they are exempt from the travel order as long as they're going from work to school and vice versa. If they do something outside of that, then the travel exemption would apply to them. That's probably the best answer I can give based off of what we have for info.
Thanks, Jeff.
Other specific questions for Gail and Jeff? Valerie.
Thanks. So, I guess my first question, a tiny question, is just for Bill on who helped make that document for the decision-making metrics.
I drafted that, and I had Gail and Jeff review it.
Okay. So just one thing I thought when looking at it was I was kind of expecting to see % of positive tests. So if there was any rationale for not including that?
Well, I think some of the data that I indicated on there would perhaps give us that. I've got the number of COVID cases in Middlesex County and Westford, a number of new daily confirmed and suspected hospital admissions, any data from the Westford Health Department. I also, on a regular basis, look at the breakdown on by age range in terms of the number of cases. But I rely on Jeff at least once a week, and sometimes more than once a week, to let me know how many new cases there are in Westford. And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we talked, in fact, we talked this morning. I think there were 7 cases in Westford right now.
I believe there are, and that may change because that was as of noontime today. And I'd like to give why it's difficult to maybe put a percentage on at what number is your threshold. In the past couple of weeks, we've had a few more cases, and it appears to be an uptick. However, I can tell you that not just seeing more cases doesn't mean there's necessarily an outbreak. You may have a single household where you have 4, 6 people living in it that may have come down with a case of COVID, and now you've got 6 people in one house that could potentially be sick. So they're all individual cases within Maven. And if you had 6 cases on one day, that may jump to 12. And all of a sudden, it looks like you doubled your caseload. It's really just one residence. And the contact tracing for that one residence may be very manageable. And I'll let Gail speak to that a little bit. But if we're seeing multiple cases at multiple locations, and we see 6 houses with individual cases, the potential for spread is definitely greater there. So I think just putting a metric on it is at whatever the percent is where we cut bait. I think it's a mistake to look at it that way. I think it's hard for us to look at it that way in public health because we look at each individual case and we have to manage them individually. So for us to offer and recommend a percentage is really hard for us.
Talk to every family member in the entire town that is positive, and I can tell you it's a very complex situation. It is a fluid situation. I know that word keeps being thrown around, but that is the perfect word. If you have a whole family that is positive, we count that as as each of those cases, but within one family. And let's face it, this virus, we are missing numbers of data with asymptomatic people that are around. We can't count them. And also we're missing in the count people who are positive, people that are symptomatic with the symptoms of COVID and never wanted to get tested. So they may be presumably positive because they have all the symptoms, but didn't want to test. So we have data is askew. There's no perfect answer. I know we're missing, a whole group that may be asymptomatic who literally have no idea they have it and are spreading. I think, when you're talking about putting people into schools, we're exposing ourselves every time we leave our home and we're with other people. And no matter how you look at this, if we go to the supermarket or the mall, we're always out in the public with other people. That in itself is risky. So I don't say it's any more risky being in class than it would be going to Market Basket. It's just we're exposing ourselves every time outside to a virus. And it's how we live with this virus and how we protect ourselves from the senior population, that you may have teachers that are immunocompromised. And we have so many scenarios. My gosh, we can go on forever, right? But we have to kind of, how do we make it work? How do we live with this virus and make it work with the kids? And I think everyone is struggling so hard to try to come up with a magic number, like, is 10 kids too many in school? We have MRSA. We have neurovirus that enters our schools. We've got the flu that enters schools. And we don't close the schools for that, but we would for COVID technically, but we wouldn't have to close all the schools. We would close maybe one school for cleaning if there was a lot of cases. But if you have like neurovirus in a school, you don't close down all the other schools. You close one school for deep cleaning and then you resume. And I kind of think that's how this is going to play out. You won't know how this is going to work but the kids probably will get it from their home, from families, more likely than not. If I'm a nurse and if I worked in a hospital, I don't now, but if I did, I worked in a hospital, I could get it and then my family would get it. You know, it's complex.
So I love that you guys are at this meeting. I would listen to you all night long. I think it really is helpful. But I think from my perspective, I think a lot of people are looking for that magic number, and helping you, hearing you explain why that's so complicated is helpful. But I think that comes from like that people are having trouble defining what is safe, right, for each family. What is safe for me might not be safe for you, you know, and so that plays into it, especially I think from what we're seeing on the staff survey. How do we make the staff feel safe? But I'd also like to say that I know there's no magic number, but I don't understand how the process would be then to decide between things that are looking worse, and so now we have to do full remote. So I guess that's the part that I'm really trying to figure out, like the risk level or some color coding or something that helps feed that decision. Because if we have, what is it, 7 cases right now, you know, if we had these numbers that we have right now at the end of August, is that you're going to look at that number and make a recommendation?
I'm going to tell you.
What is that? Sorry.
Sorry. I'll tell you this. We're happy to share the data we have, and we're happy to sit and give advice, but we can't make the recommendation as the Board of Health whether the schools should open in any capacity. It's our job to give you that information, and we'll give you the best data we can and the most up-to-date data that we can in order to allow you to make your best decision.
And
okay.
Valerie,
like maybe the advisory board idea might be really helpful, where we can put more than one person in a room and we can find out what's happening in the schools. We can give our raw data on what we're getting for numbers. And I think that may be a better way to approach what we do, as opposed to just trying to say, well, when we get to this number, we're gonna stop, we're gonna change, because it may not be as simple as that for us. I know the Department of Early and Secondary Education has set their guidelines, but we're going to follow the Department of Public Health and CDC guidelines, because we have an entire community that we have to think of as well. And all of our guidance and all of our instruction comes directly from the state epidemiologist. And I can tell you that Gail and myself sit in, I'm not even sure how many hours of meetings a week at this point anymore, in trying to gather the best information we can. One way I'd like the people to look at this is we've got over 100 years worth of flu data on how people have reacted. And we have exactly 6 months of COVID data. So every month that goes by is just that much more. And we're just working with such a small amount of information, and we're trying to base some real world decisions off of that. So I would be hesitant to recommend that the health department would put a number on it. I think an advisory board that could work on that and just give you the tools you need to do your job as the school committee.
And
I was just going to say thank you both so much for sharing your evening with us.
And I share those sentiments. One, the sentiments from you, Valerie, because you're up here on my screen. That's what I'm pointing there. That, like, yeah, that need to have that tangible threshold. Like, how do we know? But also really appreciate the nuance from you, Jeff, about the complexity of it and how it changes day to day. And it's different now than it will be in the fall, because we know it might come back even stronger in the fall. But then the other thing I think we haven't said that really has to be said is our numbers they seem relatively low. I know we're not putting that qualifier on them right now, but I think, you know, we feel like they're relatively low, but nobody's in school, right? Nobody's going anywhere. And so, you know, that's why I think being really extra cautious at the beginning of the school year, where we kind of creep into it and say, okay, how are we doing? Okay, how are we doing? to make sure that we're not opening the deluge, because I encourage you to Google what's happening in Georgia school and Georgia camp and Indiana school. And not that we're the same, there's a lot of differences, but it does definitely raise your eyebrows.
Gloria, may I just make a comment? And first of all, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed my discussions with Jeff and Gail. They are always full of information and always helpful and cooperative. And so it's been a delight from that respect. I honestly think, since Westford has a relatively low incidence in terms of numbers of cases, I think down the road, that decision may be made for us in terms of if we start to see an uptick in cases here, you have to make the assumption that there are probably a greater number of cases elsewhere in the state. And there's where I think, the governor may make the decision for us and issue an executive order across the state. So, I wouldn't be surprised if the trend is upward over a period of time, if that decision is made.
Alicia?
So I have to say that's one of my sticking points as well. What you just said about we can only share with you the data we have, we're closed. The state has been closed, and it takes a long time. I have a family member who just went for a test this week. We won't know whether or not she's positive for a little while. And that's a bit of an overshare, but we won't know for a while because the testing is taking so long to get back to the cities and towns. And I think the governor phased us in for reopening, and we're still waiting on seeing what happens between phase 2 and phase 3, but we're seeing an uptick. And though I know that there is no model that works for every one person, in my own personal family, in my immediate family, in my extended family here in town, there is no one model that works for all of those kids. I can't help but think I agree with Chris and Sean. I think giving ourselves a little bit more time to watch what happens as the state opens. It's terrible for working parents. It's hard on the kids. But if we extended remote for the beginning of the year, maybe those numbers could catch up, because we don't know. We're watching the numbers slowly eke up. But I also have family in Georgia, and they've seen their numbers swing wildly up because they have been open. And I think that's where I want to exercise an overabundance of caution. I also want to bring us back to equity, because Kerry told us at the beginning of this meeting, we're back to being a Title I district. Now, for those of you in the audience who aren't quite sure what Title I means, it's based on the number of kids who receive free and reduced lunches. Based on what the economy has done in the last couple of months, we have a greater amount of families who need help, which means a lot of this is going to impact them differently. And equity issues will become magnified. And I think there's a lot of places here where we need community support. But I also think that we need to balance that with the giving ourselves some time to understand better what it is we're asking teachers and students to risk, because we've been closed. We haven't had the numbers. We're getting new numbers every day.
Avery.
So just to play devil's advocate a little bit, we haven't been in schools. We've all been sort of doing our own thing. And for a lot of the kids, they've been out doing their own thing with their friends, not socially distant. And so I've been sitting on the hygiene along with Valerie, and hearing today all the things that Paul Fox and the facilities are doing to make our classrooms safe for the children. One could argue that they'll be safer in the classroom than they are on their own doing what they wish to do. I see Brian nodding. And so we are deep cleaning these rooms. We are providing hand sanitizer and PPE and checking air systems. And we are making those schools so safe that for me, sometimes I wonder if they aren't safer there. And so just as a flip, and I want to say that for Gail, I want her to help me convey. I know there's a lot of fear out there, and we were all terrified at the beginning of this, and a lot of us still are terrified about the unknown. But it has been shown that masks, social distancing, and hand hygiene really reduce the risk of spread. I'm not saying it's zero. I'm not saying it's ever going to be zero. There's always some amount of risk. But I'm trying to put the fear in check for what we are asking our teachers and students to go into. Gail, is there anything? I mean, we know we talked a little bit.
So thank you. First of all, a mask is a barrier device, and it is used to decrease the incidence of, communicable disease. It is not 100%. We still put people in quarantine if you are exposed to somebody, even if you wore a mask. But the mask definitely is a wonderful barrier. And so with all the PPE, I've been on with Avery on the PPE committee with the school, trying to help with putting that together. I've been working with Cheryl Carpenter to put together a whole document. I've been working in different aspects of the schools, trying to really kind of put this all together and make sense of it. The number I just gave you earlier at the start of this was 15 kids since March. You are correct. The kids have been out of school since then. But I also want to say that camps have been open. We've had camps in town, and I'm going to knock on wood, haven't had a major outbreak from any of the camps. Oh God, I hope I didn't just set myself up for that. But so, I mean, things have been open, and things, kids are playing in the playground, whether we should have let them or not, whether we're letting them social distance or not, they're still doing it. And I haven't really seen any additional cases that alarmed me. So to put it in perspective, 15 kids since March, and we are going to get more cases. It's like the flu. When you're sitting next to somebody, you're gonna probably get the flu. You're gonna get the coronavirus, the cold from somebody. We just are. We have to live with the strep throats, the ear infections, the runny noses, all fall and winter. And this is why this is complex, because it mirrors COVID. And that's why this is going to be a very complex thing for the teachers. They're going to say to the sick kid, go to the nurse, and the nurse is going to be like, I don't know if you have it. And they're going to send everyone home. There's going to be a line of parents going in and out, picking up their kids all day, because we can't diagnose that. We don't know what you have. So we have to learn to we're going to have an uptick at some point, whether it's from the cohorts in class or it's from outside of that.
So do we have other specific questions for Gail and Jeff at this point? Ming Chen.
No, that's not. Actually,
if
it's not for Jeff and Gail.
Okay, then hold off. Anything specific for Jeff and Gail? Because I have one closing question for them. Anybody else questions for Jeff and Gail? Okay, Ming Chen, you get the floor next after this. The question I have for Jeff and Gail is probably an impossible question to answer, so I'll preface it with that. But it is the impossible question that this committee is facing. So I might as well get the expert opinion while I have you here. As you indicated, Gail, there is not a no risk situation, even in the scenario where we keep all the kids remote. And the kids are doing all remote learning. They never step foot in a school building. There's still potential for being exposed. Some of those children may be in childcare situations. Some of those kids are just going to get exposed from going to the grocery store, or in the neighborhood if they play with a friend, which we can't control. So there's not a no risk scenario, but there is the fully remote scenario. There are different versions of these hybrid scenarios. The hybrid that has been proposed to us, which is the 5 days on, 5 days off, in terms of building. I know they'd be learning that whole time, but they'd be in the building for half days, half population, and then that flips to the other cohort. Other surrounding towns have made the decision to go with full days, which involve lunches in buildings, and maybe doing a 2 day on, 2 day. So kind of like Monday, Tuesday might be the A pod, and then Thursday, Friday might be the B pod. That's another version of the hybrid. Then of course there's the full in. We know that full in, full return to school, that's 3 foot distancing, not 6 foot that we'd be able to hopefully maintain in the hybrid model. So in terms of your professional opinion as public health experts, are we looking at a continuum of risk in terms of those different styles of opening? And specifically, do you see a difference in terms of health risk in the various options in the hybrid model?
So I think if an opinion is requested, then obviously if you're all remote, then obviously you're not going to be spreading it to the teacher or to the fellow students. If you do my opinion on hybrid versus full day, if the guidance definition is greater than 6 feet and longer than 15 minutes, then it really doesn't matter per se for whether it's a half day or a full day, because at that point it's going to be longer than 15 minutes. No matter how you slice it, you don't have school for 15 minutes. So it's all going to be exposed, even if it's a half day. To Carrie's point, what the school lunches and the mask wearing and taking the mask off and everything, that exposes a little bit further because you don't have a barrier device. And I understand the hybrid model based on the fact that you can't control all day long for 6.5 hours these children taking their mask off, putting on their head, putting on their feet, flipping it across the room. They get tired, they're hot. I mean, you're going to have a teacher yelling at the kids all day long, put that back on, stay away from Johnny, stay away from. So the shorter time is probably better, but there's no not risk in any of these except for remote. I mean, they're going to go to the market basket, they're going to have just as much risk. I know that didn't answer your question, Gloria. I know, because it's so complicated. I didn't answer it well. I know.
Oh, that's okay. I told you it was an impossible question. Yeah, Jeff, do you want to take a turn at impossible question?
Sure. I love doing that. The one thing we've learned in the 6 months that we've been battling this virus is the reason why we've done everything the way we've done it is not to collapse our healthcare system. And we've done a lot of hard work. And I think across the state and in some parts of the nation, not all of them, obviously, we've achieved that. And I think we're learning how to live with the virus. And I don't see it going away anytime soon. And I'm not sure what a vaccine is going to mean or do for us. It could potentially be something that this could theoretically go away after it runs a certain course. There could be herd immunity after a couple of years. This could be a seasonal thing that we have to battle every year, and now we're vaccinating as we do a flu. We don't really know yet, and we're waiting to see what happens. So I think the question is on the risk of going in. I don't know how you could. Obviously, not in at all is the lowest risk, and all in is the highest risk. I think the school committee needs to make a decision on at what point do you want to assign some educated and calculated risk to what happens. And that's what we try to do every day when we're in our meetings and trying to apply the guidance we have to apply. is we realize there's risk. I mean, if we want to make it no risk, we shut the state down completely and nobody's open doing anything. And we obviously know that wouldn't work for in any way, shape, or form for a lot of us. So that's about the best way I can answer it. I don't even know if I got close to an answer for you, but
For I guess I'll ask a more specific thing.
Can I try it a different way?
Sure, go for it, Avery.
What we have this only when it's safe. You know, people keep saying only when it's safe. Well, can you define what only when it's safe is? I mean, I was thinking that meant vaccine, but I'm hearing now Jeff saying, no, that might not be really only when it's safe.
we don't know the answer to only when it's safe. I mean, I think everybody has their own definition of that.
Okay.
You have a very high risk person that has a lot of comorbidities. Only when it's safe for them, maybe you don't see anybody except in a bubble through the window and your food is passed to you. Only when it's safe to a healthy younger person, maybe to be able to go out and live their life and do things, but do it socially distanced with a mask and sanitizing your hands. So I think it's relative only when it's safe when you're talking about an entire society.
Well, there is risk to this. There's going to be risk to getting sick at any point here. We're vulnerable to a virus that has no cure and no vaccine right now. And the question is, how can we live with this? Because we've lived with it for 6 months. Now we're trying to get people back into school. And what is safe for you in your own personal life and your own family is going to have to be it. That's the decision. It's really based on your choice, whether you feel comfortable sending your child in with other kids. We can't ensure 100% positivity rate of guarantee no one's going to get sick based on, well, I put my kid in school and my kid got sick with COVID. There's a virus. There is no vaccine for the virus. The CDC, I am telling you, changes weekly. I've been advised more things that evolved over the last 6 months, and I listen every single time they're on. I'm always talking with epidemiologists. I am doing my homework. I give the best advice I can possibly give to everybody that I talk to, everybody. I'm doing the very best I can with what I know based on the CDC's guidance, and it changes. So again, everything that we're saying here today literally could change tomorrow. They come up with new data. And as time goes on, that's when we're going to start seeing more data, because as phases start, coming into play, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, we're slowly trying to get, into the workforce and back into schools. And that's where you're going to build the data. We don't have that right now. And it's so hard to give you a concrete answer when data is still developing right now. The CDC is just trying to keep up with it. So
and that really speaks to that uncertainty. That level of uncertainty speaks to a couple of things. As one, at least in my opinion, we want to do things slowly. We want to ease any changes. We need to ease in, ease out, and we need to be able to track. And we have a Board of Health to do this, to track the cases and to help us test and trace. But then lastly is we need that flexibility, because as Gail just said, it's going to change. The guidance is going to change. The actual conditions on the ground are going to change with seasons, with schools opening. And so that's just my final push of maximum flexibility in whatever we do.
So I'll close with saying we'll work with you as close as we can in giving you any data we have. We'll share with you anything we get that's relevant for you guys to make a decision on what you want to do to move forward at any time. So feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'll do the best we can to give you the best guidance to make your choices.
I know we could do this all night, and I'm sorry, I can't resist. I got one more because I got you here. We just keep talking about how we don't have a lot of data, but you did indicate that we do have a little bit of data in terms of summer. So I don't know if you have this number. Do you know the number of summer camps that are open this summer? you said there haven't been any outbreaks, but do we know the number of camps, the number of kids that are in those camps? Do we know the number of hours the kids are in those camps? And are the kids eating lunch at camp? Because lunch has been a question that's come up.
The 4 camps that are go through the health department, I don't know the number of how many kids off the top of my head. However, and I don't think they're doing lunches at their place, although I think they are allowed to bring water and snacks. So I think they are bringing water and snacks to the, like not being served, you know what I mean? Like they're not being served like cafeteria style. They are bringing their own snacks and drinks to camp. So there are 4 camps that I inspect personally that at the beginning of the season. The municipalities, like the rec department, they're separate from us, like they have their own, and I don't know exactly, but I can tell you I don't have any cases right now from any particular camp specific. I mean, you know, nothing major. I mean, nothing has occurred that my alarm went off, you know.
So what I can offer you for some info on what Gail just said is in those 4 camps, they were given guidance from the state on the amount of space they had to provide per camper or per person for rec programs. They developed their number off of that, and it was all based off of the inside space of whatever building they may have for inclement weather. So they could have a 100-acre football field that would fit 60, 70, 80 kids, but only have a building that could house 20 inside. They would have to operate off of that 20 for their camp. Our rec programs developed a pretty in-depth program in order to operate. It was all based off of state guidance that we all did review. We reviewed all of the other summer programs. And like Gail said, to date that we're aware of, we have not had an outbreak at any 4 of the camps. And I'm really sorry I just said that because I feel like tomorrow could be bad.
I'm sweating.
Not trying to jinx anything. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for answering these questions. We know some of them were impossible to answer. So thank you both really much. Thank you. And for all you're doing, not just for Westford schools and Westford school kids, but for the entire community. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff and Gail.
Bye.
Jen, that was an incredibly long wait, but you said you had something that was not related to Jeff and Gail. So you're up next, Ming Chen. Jeff and Gail, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. All right. So I think the whole purpose of our public school system is to serve our kids. I'm really interested in the only student in the panel to say what he has to say. But before he says anything, I think Valerie last week actually mentioned Case League, right? So probably there are some data which we can learn from Case League as well, because Case League has been open.
As has Rodenbush.
Yeah, you know, every.
I've definitely seen the Brian hand, and I had you on deck after Ming Chen. I had my list. Sorry, Brian. I know it's been a long wait. Brian, you're up.
Well, I think it's just important to remember that the hybrid mode would be to kind of serve the working parents, and especially working parents with those with young kids, so that they have the means so that they can work and basically not just be like taking full-time care and teaching their kids. So I think if we do the hybrid mode, I think full days would be the best option for that, because I think high schoolers have proven that we can go through full 6 hours. I know I and many of my friends have like working jobs that we work like 6+ hours wearing masks and being socially distant. So I don't think that'll be a problem in the high school or even the middle school area at all. And like we've been doing the past 6 months, that we've been adapting to every situation as they come. And I think wearing masks all day and figuring out lunches would just be another thing we'll have to tough through and adapt to. And I think that we could be able to do that. And that, with that said, I think full days hybrid mode would be a really good idea, because I think the kids really want to get back to school, and I think the working parents need Like, I don't think the half days would be efficient to working parents. I don't think it would work. Like, it defeats its own purpose. And that's pretty much all.
Thank you, Brian. If you need to wave again, just keep waving harder, because I'm sorry, I missed your hand the first couple times.
Don't worry about it. Okay.
Yeah, keep waving at me. I'm new to this. Okay, other hands. Who's on deck? Valerie.
Thanks for jumping. I just wanted to mention thank you to Ingrid for jumping out of agenda order. I just wanted to have kind of a fuller picture of what data we were being presented with tonight before we all went around to ask questions. I'm honestly struggling with evaluating like the merits of the plan, just because I'm frustrated by the poor process that has led us here. I just need to clear the air to say that the lack of communication has been incredibly frustrating. I do not feel involved in the process as a stakeholder. And this is a very difficult situation, even with the best of communication. We pushed this meeting to get more data, and I did see some of that tonight, but I hadn't seen any of it before 4 p.m. So feel really crippled at trying to process that information real time. I do have confidence in the leadership team, the teachers, the staff to educate the students to the best of their ability. But just to, like I said, to clear the air and to be transparent with the public, I just need to say that I think we have been placed in an impossible position with the lack of communication. So for tonight, my thoughts are more about the big picture, trying to rectify how 75% of our families want hybrid, and we're seeing the staff survey say 70% of teachers want remote. And so I'm really looking for how we can help teachers feel more prepared for the hybrid model and how we can help them feel safer. I don't have an answer to that tonight, but I would hope that to me feels like the biggest hurdle moving forward is trying to bring those two pieces together. I have a couple specific questions. For the decision-making metrics advisory board, I'm sure you can guess my question is, was any school committee representation considered or other staff considered?
Not on this initial draft, Valerie. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever having a school committee member or members be on the advisory board.
Okay, I think that would be helpful, especially if we're like the way after that conversation with Gail and Jeff, I think having us be helpful, having us be involved in the decision making is really best case.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot about like a remote start, and I struggle with that just because I feel like we do have low numbers, and the data seems to point to that the under 10-year-old crowd, is better suited to being in person. So I guess if we did some sort of phase in, I'd like to see that age grade levels starting. And to kind of act like what could we do in September that if we don't have October, to create those relationships and focus on the social and emotional. I'd also thank you, Carrie, for I didn't feel like the pros and cons were missing. I followed your rationale on the hybrid schedule, and I really appreciated seeing behind the curtain on that. And I think that piece has been missing so up until tonight. But I do still, have concerns about working families. Is any of the community options on your meeting bill to cover the remote home week in that morning slot? I mean, it seems like we're only really focused on how do we help families with that early release dismissal.
We're going to look at all options because all options are still on the table. Either they may not be now. I mean, you may select a model, but we may be transitioning to a model. So we're going to look at we're really not going to look at the full return model, but we are going to look at the hybrid and the full remote in terms of those options.
Okay.
I do think, Bill, when we talked earlier about that meeting that you created for Monday, we were looking at that after school remote learning center. We don't want to call it care because we want to remind people that students are supposed to be in school still doing school, but for that group that is in person, and then in addition, see if there's anything that can be created to be offered for that B-pod group who is at home for the duration of the school day. So we will definitely pose that question, and it'll just be about the capacity of those organizations that he'll be talking with.
Okay, thanks. And my last sort of specific question, I guess, would be, how did those bus numbers compare to usual ridership? And if bus was the limiting factor for the AM, PM kind of full day kindergarten cohort proposal, and if bus numbers are lower, could we reconsider?
That's one of the things that we will be looking at right away, Valerie. We'll be meeting with the bus company. That's one of the reasons also that we went to a geographic division of students in each respective school system, in school district, instead of alphabetical, because they're more condensed bus routes that could be perhaps done in a faster amount of time. With the numbers of people who have indicated that they would not be putting their child on a bus, there may be enough bus capacity. We now have to go to work and take a look at that factor also.
Thanks.
Yep.
Ingrid, did you have some additional?
Oh, I just wanted to say, like, I think we started out talking or saying now a few hours ago, it really depends who comes to. You could have a whole, until we really have the data of who signs up and at what bus tier as well. Those are those tricky parts of the puzzle that we really won't have the full answer. But I think based on our initial survey, we should have the capacity of the buses. I have also just costed out how many buses we could afford if we, lost all or a significant part of our bus fee offset. And I think right now, based on at least the initial indication of what parents are thinking about bus transportation, we would still have capacity.
It is 3 minutes till 10 o'clock. We all know not much good happens after 10 o'clock in these meetings. And there's still a lot left on our agenda. I am sensing that this is not a committee that's ready to make a decision. I think we did get some valuable information today, and we got some valuable information this evening. I think we got it close enough to the time of the meeting and or during the meeting that we really haven't had time to fully process and react to it. And Valerie just mentioned a word that hasn't even come up in the course of this meeting, which is kindergarten. And I think kindergarten is a huge issue, and it has been a huge concern of some committee members and also of mine in terms of how kindergarten is handled for our youngest learners in either a fully remote or a hybrid, and the different modes of hybrid that is being proposed to us this evening versus what some other towns are doing, and how that those different types of hybrid could impact our youngest learners as well. So there's more to discuss here. I think we as a committee are going to have to discuss timeline and when we're meeting again, because I think we're meeting again. And I'm going to issue 2 apologies. One, to the community for the fact that we do not have an answer to you yet, but I do not want to ask this committee to make a decision quickly or prematurely. I would rather have us continue to meet and make the best possible, most informed decision that we can, instead of rush that decision. Although I know that you are very anxious to have that decision and to start planning for your fall and to start making plans for your families and your children. So, the other apology I will issue, as I did forecast at the beginning, I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get to public comments and questions. I know there are many. We will look at them. We will examine them. I assure you, I hope that many of those questions and comments were rolled into a lot of the comments from committee members this evening. I think there are a lot of parallel patterns from my look, and I think from the look I know other committee members have been watching it during the meeting. So I believe there are a lot of parallel issues to what we have discussed here tonight. Other closing comments in terms of where we go from here and timeline. Alicia?
I want to call everyone's attention to, you should all have received an email today from the CPAC. The CPAC voted on a brand new board. I think it was last week. I've kind of lost all concept of time. I stepped away from the CPAC board and several new people stepped up into the board and they jumped right in with both feet. And they have surveyed the special education parents in town to find out how things went in the spring, what they're concerned about in the fall. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at those preliminary results also. They worked very hard on it. It was a great survey.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. I did see that come in late this evening as well. And that, again, an incredibly important piece of this puzzle is how these various models are going to impact our students with special needs. Other closing thoughts, timeline where we go from here, or do we just have to, I mean, I know we have a difficult timeline in terms of what the state is asking us to do. I know we have limitations in terms of posting additional meetings, and I don't know if we are able to post another meeting for this week, or if we will be posting a meeting for sometime on Monday.
So just logistically, potential votes that we would take. I mean, I know the plan has to be submitted to the state. I don't know if we vote to thumbs up that or not, or if we just vote on what plan we recommend to start the year. Because that, I mean, that determines a little bit what the timeline of those votes would be, I guess, a little bit. Like if there's a dire need to take a plan approval vote before the 10th. And there's also, I mean, I want to say there's the need from the community to have certainty too. And so we don't want to unnecessarily prolong decisions on what the starting plan will be.
So I would say that my question then becomes, what is it we are looking for as far as answers before we take that vote as well? Because the vote is important, but we're hesitant to take the vote because we don't feel like we have answers to some pretty big questions. So I think determining what the questions are is something we need to do too before we figure out when that vote gets taken.
Just please know that I have to get this in sometime on Monday, on August 10th. And, you know, certainly want you to discuss this as thoroughly as possible. You know, it does, from the conversation tonight, look like certainly there is some momentum for the remote model, but I think, you know, I'm sure you need to discuss it some more. And so if we could have a meeting on sometime on Monday, that would be very helpful, because I do need to provide the state with what our model is going to be, what our final plan is going to be for them to review.
Valerie?
Do we know anything about the extensions? I've been in the MASC orientation classes this week for new members, and other districts have mentioned extensions.
I have not heard anything about an extension, Valerie. I can check tomorrow, but I honestly have not heard anything about extensions. Yeah, the problem with that, from an operational standpoint, is that we need to know what to prepare for, as you all know. And the more and more this becomes extended, the more pressure we're under to put into place what you ultimately vote on. And so it's, it is a time issue for us.
And the longer we prolong a vote, the longer parents are waiting to get their plans in place and set up their childcare or work schedules.
Yeah, very, very true.
Yeah. There are enough parents' questions. There are like hundreds of questions from the parents, and then probably there are over like a couple of hundred questions from the committee as well. I don't think we're going to be able to actually get most of the questions answered, because most of the questions are pretty much expressing the same sentiment regarding what the community want. So after all, this public school is funded by taxpayers, right? So I think we got to actually to listen to what the parents want and what the students want, and then I'll find a common ground or compromise. I just don't think that we should actually throw what this town, the parents, what students want, so out of window.
Well, there's where, the survey data indicated that about 76% of the parents felt that they wanted their children to go back to school in a hybrid model. But I hear your concerns in terms of your inclination, to some of you, to do remote. But you have a lot of information in the plan that was submitted to you a while back. We now have the information from the parents in terms of percentages of parents who feel comfortable returning, and so I would like to think you have enough information, although you may think otherwise, to make a decision sometime, perhaps early next week, on Monday, that is, so I can get the template in with the approved plan to the ESC. And I will check through tomorrow morning to see if there is any discussion on extensions, but extensions don't do us any good in terms of figuring out what we need to do to plan and implement what's going to happen in September.
So I don't want to prolong this any more than anyone else does. I just see it as a pretty big hole. And again, as a newbie, I don't know what this looks like, but about a huge gap between what our staff is comfortable with and what our families are asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I personally struggle with taking a vote on something that our staff is not supporting. So I don't know how to rectify that and what answers to get that and when that meeting would be, but that's where my sticking point.
I think that's going to be a bridge too far to reconcile. I just don't know how that can be resolved.
Well, I would also suggest that one of the things that is considered is a phased reopening. I know Chris had mentioned something similar, where potentially we start remote, bring everyone online, and then bring in the hybrid plan. So again, because this is all extremely complicated and there are a lot of complicated moving parts here, yes, we need to make the decision as soon as possible, but as we try to make this decision, we need to take into account as many factors as we possibly can. And frankly, I think that's something to be considered, a phased reopening.
But I don't think we have a robust enough remote situation where we can start remote. I think we should start hybrid, because you got to meet the kids, get to know and everything, and maybe consider going to remote during flu season so we don't have mass absences.
Okay, we could do this all night. We could debate this all night. I think we have two options here. If I'm not going to ask the committee for a vote, if the committee wants to go around the table and just say, if you had to say where you are right now, where are you right now, and see if that informs. If you're not comfortable doing that, just say, I'm not comfortable doing that right now, and that's fine too. The next step I'm going to suggest is that every member on the committee think about what pieces of information do you need, what data do you need before you can make a decision. And then obviously we're going to have some communications with Bill and his team about when that meeting can be. Can that meeting be before Monday? I don't know that it can be for open meeting law reasons. If that meeting has to be on Monday, I know no one wants to prolong this, and no one is suggesting that we need to prolong this for a week or more. But an extra day or two to have that final meeting would be helpful if it is possible to get a 1 to 3 day type extension from the state. So if anyone wants to have a final thought about where you are right now, feel free, raise your hand. Otherwise, I suggest that we discuss offline our possibilities for our next meeting, and everyone think about what data you need, and please share that with me. I will compile it and share it with administration. Does that sound like a reasonable plan moving forth? Okay. Anybody final thoughts or where you stand right now? I'll say for myself, based on some of the data I've seen tonight, it is hard to say for sure, but I think that a hybrid model makes sense, but I am still struggling with the particular hybrid model that has been put forth to us and how to reconcile that with the need of working families and with our special education learners and with our youngest kindergarten learners. And that's where I struggle with the current hybrid model, but I will put together what my concerns are and what my questions are on that. Avery?
I have to say I am still on the hybrid side of things. I think it's important to get the kids back to school. I feel that we can do it safely at this point. I think their mental status needs to be considered and weighed equally or more so than the academics right now. And getting back to some normalcy is important for them. So I would vote in the spirit of a hybrid. I do think that we need to make sure that we have explored that this is the best hybrid. I know we have a lot of other options on the table as far as what tweaks to the hybrid. And so maybe those can be some of the questions we can ask.
Chen?
Yeah, so to Avery's point, I think we have actually heard a lot from teachers and parents. And then I talked to some students, but I think the ultimate goal of this system is to serve the kids and then what really the kids want. The kids are actually, a lot of kids I spoke to, they're not only bored. Some of kids, they don't really like school. Now they actually really miss school. So I just don't think it's valuable for the mental health, for other things, for the kids to still stay at home permanently for prolonged period of time, because by September it's already 6 months. So I'm leaning toward like hybrid, but I do want the hybrid to be tweaked because it definitely creates a huge problem for working families. And then the full day and a half day hybrid, I believe our administration can make both of them work. And then I'm leaning more toward the full day hybrid.
Alicia?
To be clear, when I'm talking about a phased reopening, I don't think we should be remote until December. I think there are arguments on all sides for getting the kids back into the buildings, and I think I am also leaning towards an AABB. I think for working parents, that might give them a little bit more clarity with their employers. It gives kids a longer time in the building. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered there, but I still very much see the merit in doing a phased reopen where we start remote. And I completely agree, we do not have a robust remote option right now, and that's a problem.
Can I interject a little bit? I think I totally agree with Anisha that Anisha mentioned that we need we cannot actually stay fully remote But I have a different take on when to start and then remote, because I'm more concerned about the school may be shut down during flu season. So get as much in-person education in as possible before Thanksgiving break. Then we may actually decide at that time to go to full remote after Thanksgiving, because then that's going to actually give us like valuable time to get kids back in school, get to know their teachers, get to know their friends. Because if we start like full remote for a couple of weeks, normally next month, then that's already into October. And then we are losing like 1 month of time for the kids to interact with each other. Although they don't have to hug each other in the school, at least like seeing each other's faces, that's so valuable. That's why I'm thinking like we should start with hybrid first instead of remote first.
Other final thoughts?
They can't see each other's faces, but that's maybe not a helpful thought. I still, the thing I can't sort of reconcile is how we go from remote to hybrid or back. I don't see where, maybe I just need to have it explained to me better. I don't see how we do that. I don't see how this plan does that. And the reconciliation of the teacher concerns, and a reminder that, well, yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would echo that maybe the phased in. I think the hybrid plan, again, if the hybrid plan, if everything goes great, I think it's actually a really good plan. I just, my concern if when things don't go well, what we do, but, you know, I guess we could, I could see giving it a try, but I think I need to see more in the remote plan and more on childcare, community childcare concerns.
Final thoughts for anybody who hasn't weighed in? Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I'll go quick. I think my biggest concerns are what are these supposed childcare options that we have outside of the schools, and we haven't really fleshed that out, and maybe that's part of this, that we'll just have to live with that uncertainty until we get closer to the start date. But I mean, if I knew what that was, that would certainly make this a much easier decision in my mind.
Yeah. May I make a comment? It's just, and I understand your concern about childcare, but we can only do so much about childcare. You know, our mission is to present a plan to you, to the best we can develop, to educate children under these very difficult circumstances. And yes, we are going to work with the community organizations to see what we can do with childcare, but we can only do so much. And I know you all understand that.
I know that's a point I've raised too, Bill, and it is a concern of mine. And I have to add, even if there are solutions for our working families, we have to be mindful of the fact that we are also imposing the expense of those solutions on working families, and we may be imposing an additional that childcare expense on working families who do have two parents working outside the home and may be struggling to make ends meet. And now, again, I understand we can't solve everybody's problems, and it's not necessarily appropriate to make the decisions solely based on that. But at the same time, if the choice of a hybrid model, if one model is we're hearing from our working families is completely unworkable and is a strain on their families, it can be the best model on the planet. But if we break families to try and get them to implement it, then their children can't access that model. So that's my final thought on the topic for tonight. Any other final thoughts from committee members who haven't weighed in with final thoughts? It's so late. I admit I've lost track. Did everyone have a final thought?
I think just me, and I'll just add that I think we can do remote or do hybrid. And for the people who are deciding on what safe means for them, that's what the remote option is for. So there's other things I struggle with, but I think hybrid would be the best choice.
Valerie, may I seek a little clarification? Are you saying the hybrid as proposed, or would you prefer another option of hybrid? And something that's been discussed tonight. 2 on, 2 off, full day. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, the continuing concern I've heard from working families is that a full day is easier to, propose to their employer, and to kind of fill in the gaps of childcare.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. We have a lot of other items still on our agenda. I know it's super late. I can see 2 methods. I can see that we just tough it out and we try and get through every other item on our agenda, or I can see that we prioritize and we pick and choose what we absolutely need to deal with tonight and what could possibly wait to a next meeting. Without having to go around the table again, show of hands, tough it out and go through the agenda as written, or okay, show of hands for tough it out. What was that? I saw, yep, okay, I'm seeing tough it out. Okay, all right.
I don't think any of these are really lengthy conversations.
Okay, I just wanted to give everybody the option. I know it's extraordinarily late, so I apologize to the committee and to all of our administration. I know it's super late, but I think it was really important to have that conversation tonight to understand where we need to go next. So
Gloria, just really quickly to let the public know, we will let them know as soon as possible when the next meeting will be, when we will take the final vote.
Absolutely. We will try and get that answer to the public tomorrow. So Chris, I know this topic deserves so much time than we're going to be able to give it tonight. But briefly, can you debrief us on the forum that we held last week?
Sure. Last Wednesday night, we had our sharing session, which featured stories from young alums and current students of our schools about how race and ethnicity have impacted their education and their experiences in our schools. And we were fortunate enough to have 2 recent alums from the class of 2018, Maida Palnati and Ian Kim, as moderators, and they did just a really fantastic job of weaving the stories together and asking good questions of those who told their stories live. I think we heard almost 30 stories, some live, some were submitted to the Westford Coalition for Change Instagram page, which, for those who don't know, has collected these anonymous stories to share to the broader community. And it's just really impactful. I encourage everybody, it's in the packet, there's a link. I'm also going to post the link to the chat, but I really encourage every single parent, student, administrator, teacher, and citizen of Westford to click the link and at some point watch the video and listen to these stories, because I think Carrie said earlier, they're hard to hear, but they're necessary to hear, I think. So just huge gratitude for everybody who made that happen and who had the courage to share. It really begs a question, which is maybe even on the agenda, of like what the next steps are. And maybe we don't get to have as full of discussion tonight about that as we'd like. I know that, we have our own, on the school side, diversity committee, and talk about what that looks like in the coming year. I know at the town side, through the select board in the town, there's talk of a town-wide diversity and inclusion committee. So that's one topic, is to talk about whether they're separate or whether it's really one body that's advising on school and town issues. And so that's something I think just for this committee to think about, like how does that sound and how does that look? Having two separate committees or having one, and what role would they play? And then the other thing that comes up for me is we've gotten to hear some of these stories, and I think we might have other opportunities to continue that process, but in parallel with that, translating that into action, and what are the things that, you know, either through the WPS 8 can't wait demands or other things that come up, whether it be the Great Ghost mascot, that the schools should look at and should consider, and coming up with sort of what that list looks like and how to prioritize them based on feasibility, based on criticality, that sort of thing. So I could see that being a next step forward as well.
May I just, briefly say, to this point in time, I've had 3 conversations in terms of setting priorities for the diversity and inclusion team. I met today with Amy Bailey, who has been working with Janet Kierstead and about 190 of our staff members in terms of the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Met with Jen Kravitz, and I'll be meeting with the 4 of them within the next 10 days to begin to put some structure to the diversity and inclusion team priorities and actions for this upcoming school year that I will be presenting to you for consideration.
Thank you, Chris, for all of the work that it took to put that forum together. Thank you to Meda Panadi and Ian Kim for doing just a beautiful job of moderating an incredibly difficult event. For anyone who hasn't watched it, I encourage you to do so. I think absolutely we need to have more discussion about this. Absolutely, we need to try and come together to figure out what are our next steps. I think they need to be concrete steps. I think they need to be defined. I think they need to be set forth with timelines and with specific people or committees who will consider them. I think Carrie touched on items at the beginning. Bill has touched on some more. I know there's other issues that the school committee has already begun thinking and talking about, but we all can and need to do a better job on this issue. I think that event proved that to us. If there's other immediate comments, of course, please make them. If we can have a more complete discussion at a later time, please, everyone in the community needs to know that this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. Sean.
I would just say briefly, Gloria, first of all, kudos to Meda and Ian. They did a fantastic job, and to all the students who were involved in it. But the point that I think in my discussion with the students is that hopefully at some point that we can have a dialogue with the students, right, as to what change we can make, right? Like, I just don't want to get lost in that, whether that is another forum or something where it's more of a Q&A between us and the administration, or whether that comes out in the diversity inclusion team meetings, you know, something like that. I just want to make sure that we're not kind of setting policy without bringing these kids who had, and I call them kids, young men and women who put so much work into this, that they're informing us in a way along this process.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, I think the 8 can't wait is a good start on that, but I agree that further dialogue, pulling in even more students, is a good idea. I guess, you know, while we're talking about it, you know, talking about the different committees, I think, and I was talking to Anita about the work the select board is looking at forming committee. I would lean towards myself, a joint committee, you know, one that looks at schools and town, because I think it's a community issue, and I don't see it being in separate silos. And I would also lean toward a community-led committee that includes students and community members, not led by us, you know, not led by the town, but really led by community members. And then that would then report recommendations to us. So that's one model. There's lots of different ways to do it. That's one model. That's what I would recommend, to let the community drive it, and but also probably have some sort of school committee and select board representation on the committee, either voting or not voting. I mean, those are details to hash out. But
I know select board is continuing their discussion of this at their next meeting. It sounds like we are moving in the direction of a community team or task force of sorts that's going to look at these issues. I think that does need to address the whole community, schools and town alike. Obviously, and I'm sure Bill would agree with this, there also needs to be a separate and discrete, as we already have, team that deals with school issues specific to things like curriculum and operational within the school. So I see those as kind of parallel efforts, and they both are important. They're both going to have slightly distinct charges, while there may be some areas that they kind of touch each other or overlap. But I think we need both going forward.
I definitely agree with that. Based on the conversation I had with Amy Bailey today, in terms of review of curriculum, the way questions are asked, information is solicited from students, review of texts, we definitely want to have a committee that continues to focus on school issues.
Another concern that it's probably worth raising too, I think, that came out of the session last week, is just making students feel like they know who they can go to when something like these things come up. And I think that maybe could be the first priority, is trying to look at that, making sure they have a safe place. I think that's another reason having a community-led, town-wide committee gives a little bit of independence to that process, because the loud and clear message was there wasn't a feeling like their concerns were going to land on the right ears in many cases. Not in every case, but in many cases. And I think, although I did get the sense that they did have faculty members that, many of them did feel like they could trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there was a real message that students who maybe have had negative experiences in our school system didn't know who to go to or who to talk to about it or how to address it. And I think we absolutely have to create those pathways for them. And the more pathways we can create, then the better accessibility and the more options we're giving students. Because I think it was clear from the forum that there are a lot of students who have had experiences and just haven't known where or how to report them. Final comments on this. I know that was a very fast discussion of a very complex issue, but obviously it is going to continue. Okay. Apologies for the turbo discussion on a very complex issue. Bill, calendar?
Yes, so presented to you a revised school calendar that complies with the commissioner's guidance of reducing the number of instructional days for students from 180 days to 170 days. You can see the first 10 days or so at the beginning of the school year devoted to preparation and planning, and that is according to the guidance of the commissioner. So this calendar does contain the 170 instructional days, but that does not impact the number of work days according to the collective bargaining agreement. So there are 185 staff days in here also that conforms with our collective bargaining agreement. So everyone would end up tentatively on June 17th. And so I will be glad to answer any questions. We have incorporated the orientation days for pre-K and K at the beginning of the school year, as well as an orientation day will be AM and PM in nature for grade 3, 6, and 9, because those days have been historically very important for students to become oriented to their building, to begin to feel comfortable before the classes start.
Other things that I would highlight in this calendar is traditionally we have had that opening day for grades 6 and 9 as they transition into new school buildings. This does expand that to have orientation days at the pre-K and kindergarten level as well, and also at grade 3, recognizing that those elementary school students missed their opportunity to have that kind of move up day experience in June. So this is an expanded version of that day. Another change that is on this calendar is the addition of Juneteenth. Our state legislature has established Juneteenth as a state holiday, and in recognition of the discussion we were just having about race in our schools, we wanted to make sure to note it on the calendar. It does so happen that this particular year, Juneteenth would be celebrated on June 19th, 2021, which is a Saturday. So it doesn't end up being a no school day as a Saturday holiday, but in future years, if Juneteenth does fall on a school day, then it would be a no school day in future years.
And I'd like to note also, we have removed several of the early release professional development days that were in, that have been historically in calendars in the past because of the nature of the models that we're looking at here.
Other questions from the committee? I don't want to underscore the importance that we are talking about a change from 180 days of learning for our students to 170 days of learning for our students. But I think what we're doing in this, as authorized by the state BESE, is buying our staff valuable time to have that professional development at the start of the school year to try and figure out how they're going to teach in a very unconventional way under very unconventional circumstances. It's exactly the opportunity that they did not have in the spring when we had to switch so quickly and unexpectedly. Now we're giving them the time and the space to figure out how to implement whatever model is ultimately decided upon. I'll add my own thought there, which is also, I think in some sense, that does create a bit of a phase in, as has been requested. And this, while it builds in that professional development for teachers, also does create a bit of a phase in into having people back into our school buildings, because our staff could be on site in our buildings and kind of learning those routines and how they're going to implement safety routines within the school buildings, and kind of figuring out some of those kinks and processes. Other questions, comments from committee members? Ming Chen.
I'm looking into the back to school nights. October 8th, Westford Academy is has no classes at WA. So in this year, what's the reason not to have classes at WA? Because we're pretty much hybrid, right?
That is subject to change. We indicated that we want to have more conversation on that. We weren't sure at this point in time what model would be approved, but that may very well be a school day. So
okay. And then are the parent conferences, are they still going to happen?
Well, we're not sure whether it'll be remote or whether it'll be in person. You know, the first opportunity for those is in November. So it's one of those things that's still up in the air, Ming Chen, but we've felt it was important to keep it on the calendar. They could at least be remote if we're still in that, in a health situation.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Sorry, can someone just give a high level overview on are there any restrictions on these 10 professional development days, or what the restrictions are on the 170?
Well, the 10 days, Valerie, are to be used for professional development, for team meetings, for grade level meetings, for technology training, certainly, and for the remote component. So all of the things that we need to focus on will be not only in those 10 days, but we'll start to ramp up in terms of conversations with staff, with coordinators before that time also. But that's the concentrated time that school systems will have to prepare their staff for whatever model that their school committee approves.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry. Anything else before we vote? Okay. The last warning I think we would want to issue on this is, yes, we're voting on a calendar revision that would revise the start date to school. As Bill has indicated, welcome to 2020, folks, subject to change. So that there may be additional changes. This is not a typical calendar year for families who like to plan vacations and whatnot very far in advance. Please book those plane tickets at your own risk, because we don't know what the spring will hold. We don't know what will happen with February vacation, April vacation. A lot of this situation is very fluid. So I don't think we can put this calendar kind of in pen the way we normally would. So please put it in pencil when you put it in your calendars.
Motion to approve.
Yep. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I'm also in favor, so that is unanimous. Bill, final suggestion I would make when this is sent out to the community. I know this is effectively for all students moving back the start of school quite a bit. I would be concerned if we are talking about any type of in-person return to the buildings, if families take those 2 weeks to travel to high-risk areas, they're going to be creating high-risk situations for our community. So if perhaps you could speak to Jeff and Gail, and maybe when announcing this change in calendar to the community, also issue those warnings about required quarantines if people do travel out of state to a high-risk state, that they would need to quarantine upon their return. And I think we just need to keep reminding people of that. This additional time, if our community can use this additional time to quarantine a little bit and confine our community bubble during that time, will make it safer for everybody.
Yep. Great idea. Yep.
Next up is some internal committee business. We normally do this earlier, but since everything has been delayed this year, we are now making our subcommittee assignments for the upcoming school year. It is included in your packet. It includes the names of folks who have been serving on reopening committees this summer, and also all of the upcoming committees we're going to need for the upcoming school year. 2 of those committees are proposed as new committees, new subcommittees of the school committee. And by our own policy, if we create a new subcommittee, we have to vote that subcommittee into existence. So I'm sorry to do this, especially so late, but I am going to ask for to have 1 discussion and then 3 votes. Perhaps if appropriate, maybe I can ask Avery as former chair if it's appropriate for us to blend all of them together and do a consensus vote, kind of like we do with a consent agenda.
I think we probably want individual votes, and so I think we probably want individual motions.
Okay.
So I can make a motion to form the school finance subcommittee, because I think we should form the committees before we vote on the assignments.
Agreed on that. Let's just have 1 discussion and then we'll do all 3 votes and keep them as separate motions. So we are suggesting forming a school finance subcommittee. It's been discussed.
Or I think someone needs to second it, which I will.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. So we've got motion and second for the first one. Are there any questions on the list of functions and duties for the school finance subcommittee? The next vote, just to preview, that we will be taking is on the superintendent search subcommittee. We've also discussed the need for this subcommittee, but again, we need to formally vote it into existence before I can assign folks to it. Any questions on the list of functions of duty? It's included in your packet, fairly self-explanatory. And then there is the chart of the assignments of the proposed duties. Any questions on that and where people were assigned? Okay, thank you all. We'll do those votes now. So Avery has motioned, Sean has seconded the motion to create a school finance subcommittee as outlined in the packet. Avery?
Wait, is this is this a majority vote? I'm sorry. Is this a simple majority?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Avery?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ming-Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm also in favor, so that is a unanimous vote. The next vote would be to, do I have a motion to form a superintendent search subcommittee?
So moved.
Second.
Avery second, Chris motion, Avery second, and voting, Avery?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
I'm also in favor, so that is also a unanimous vote. And thank you for your patience, everyone. Do I have a motion to approve the subcommittee assignments as proposed in the packet?
So moved.
Motion, Alicia, second.
Aye. Second.
Second from Avery, thank you. Voting, Avery?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
And I am also in favor. So that is also settled. Thank you for being brave and getting through that. That allows those committees to begin their work. For anyone who's still brave enough and watching from home, obviously those subcommittees are subject to open meeting law and would post any meetings and updates on their activities. Will come back to the full committee. Any other business before we move on to warrants? All right, Alicia, are you ready for warrant motions?
I am. Okay, so first up is payroll warrant number 2106 SP. Sorry, motion to approve payroll warrant 2106 SP dated August 6th, 2020. Give me 1 second, it's in 2 different places. Sorry, all. In the amount of, oh wait, I don't have an amount. Sorry, please hold.
Ingrid, can we
Yes.
phone a friend, Ingrid?
Yep, I got it right here. $373,036.97.
Thank you. So that was Alicia's motion as supplemented by Ingrid. Do I have a second? Avery second. Avery seconds. Okay, voting. Avery.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Chen.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I, unanimous. Next one, do you have the next one, Alicia? And I think this was maybe listed incorrectly on the agenda, but it's just a typo, so I think we're still okay.
Yes, it's a typo in that it is listed as a payroll warrant, but this is actually an expense warrant. Ingrid, do you have the amount for that? Because I don't have that in the
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to type it in the chat.
Oh, thanks.
So this would be motion to approve expense.
Yep, motion to approve expense warrant number 2106 SE dated August 6th, 2020. And Ingrid, please list the amount.
$445,691.84.
Okay, Alicia's motion as supplemented by Ingrid. Thanks for the phone a friend. Second.
Second.
From Avery, and voting, Avery.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I would make it unanimous. So thank you for those approvals. Meeting minutes. Alicia, what do we have for meeting minutes?
So first up, we have motion to approve regular session minutes from, and I'm going to read all three, June 15th, 2020, July 13th, 2020, and July 15th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions, amendments?
Thank you, Valerie.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, for stepping in and helping out on those for the summer. So we have motion second, voting, Avery.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
Unanimous. And final one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Motion to approve executive session minutes dated July 13th, 2020 and July 27th, 2020, not for public release.
Second.
Thank you. And any questions on those? Avery, voting.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Jen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I'm also aye, so unanimous. Personnel update.
We have a pretty active sheet that goes back all the way to the spring that lists a number of replacements for people who have left the system for one reason or another, transfers, reduction in force, resignations, and retirements. And so just to keep you informed, there's no particular action that is needed, as you know, but just for informational purposes.
Thank you for providing that information, Bill. Any questions? Okay, final piece of business. Alicia, do you want to do the honors?
Okay. So, sorry, scrolling down. Motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to Unit A collective bargaining, and an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position. The committee will not return to public session.
Do I have a second? Thank
Second.
you. Roll call. Avery.
Aye.
Alicia. I think I saw an eye there. Chris.
She turned herself off.
Aye.
Chen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I, so we are unanimous. I will see you all in executive session in a moment. For any members of the public still on the line, thank you for your patience tonight. I know it was a long one. We will get you word as soon as possible as to when we will next be meeting. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.